Okay, good evening, all. Welcome to the Monday, August 4th City Council work session. Welcome back to everybody after our mini 2-week recess. Let's call the meeting to order. Cindy, can you start with roll call, please?
Certainly, Mayor. Ms. Conley?
Here.
Ms. Downs?
Here.
Ms. Flynn?
Here.
Ms. Hiscott?
Here.
Mr. Snyder virtually?
Yes, here virtually.
Ms. Underhill?
Here.
Here.
Thank you, Council.
And does someone have an electronic motion for Mr. Snyder?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to allow Councilmember Snyder to participate remotely. Councilmember Snyder, could you please identify your remote location and reason for participation by electronic means?
Right. Personal reasons, Boston, Massachusetts, to participate in a panel on disaster risk management and financing for the National Conference of State Legislatures.
Great. I move that City Council approve electronic participation by Councilmember Snyder in this meeting for personal reasons pursuant to City Council's adopted policy.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Underhill on the second. Can you call roll, please?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Downs?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hiscott?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
And Mayor Hardy?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Snyder. Okay, we
Thank you.
have 3 big meaty items tonight, so thank you, staff, for joining us during a beautiful August night. First up, I think we have affordable living policy, which we've seen several times before. I think we are nearly close to the finish line. Fingers crossed. I think we'd love to hear the final status before next week.
And I'll turn it over to Mr. Brendan Woodley, who will give us the staff report tonight. And as the mayor noted, the request tonight is for a final review, and this is scheduled for a public hearing and final consideration at your meeting on August 11th. And one thing I will just note that, so much work has gone into this plan by staff, by members of the community, by the working group, by the Housing Commission, EGSAC, Planning Commission, City Council. And also, if you think about when we started this planning effort, so much has changed in the national and the regional economic outlook. And we're aware of that. We acknowledge that. And even with all of that change, sort of the inexorable facts are, and this report really documents this very, very well, our cost to access housing in the city has just accelerated tremendously, and particularly in the past 5 years. It lays out how rental costs have accelerated over 25% over this period, and even more strikingly, for purchase of townhouses, condos, and single-family homes have all gone up some 70% over the period since the last time this plan, this policy was adopted 5 years ago. So it is very stark. There are very difficult things, I think, that governments across the board need to do to try to help address this. And this this policy helps clarify the problem and some of the things we can do to address it here locally. Mr. Woodley, thank you for your work on this.
Thank you very much, Wyatt. Appreciate it. Appreciate the kind words.
Is your microphone on?
It's green. Is that good? I can hear myself. Okay. Staff report here before you today is following the Planning Commission's public hearing and recommendation that the affordable living policy be included in the comprehensive plan as an amendment to Chapter 10 titled Housing a Complete Community. This motion has been included in your staff report as attachment 4. The affordable living policy draft in the staff report is mostly unchanged since the last time you saw it back in June, having only a few revisions as requested by the Planning Commission. That can be seen in the second attachment, which is a red line of the differences between the version that you've seen last and the slight changes that the Planning Commission have requested. These comments can also be reviewed on the attachment 3, which is a comments tracker, which is similar to what we provided last time as well. And finally, as part of the comprehensive plan update process, the city provided notice to neighboring jurisdictions, including Fairfax and Arlington, And we actually got a response from Arlington, which is in your attachment 5, which is essentially a letter of support of this document as well. So I thought that was important to make sure we pointed that out. So without going through every minor change, I think I can just pause there and take any questions or comments.
Okay. Thank you. Brendan, questions or comments? Laura?
Thank you for that introduction. And I came onto council after this process was in motion. I know this has been a long time coming. I was in the Human Services Advisory Council, and they had asked me to define what a stretch goal is. And I said I thought it meant that this was a goal, but it was going to be a tough goal. Is that a good way to describe a stretch goal?
That sounds good to me. We don't
That we're gonna
mention
try
any
to do,
stretch
but it will
goals in
be
this document, but that sounds like a good.
Something-
There are two stretch goals on priority, because this was the same question I had. Priority goal number 2, and then number 17 as well.
So it's a
I
goal,
kind
but
of had, I'm like, I would prefer to take stretch goal. If it's our goal, it's our goal.
yeah.
If it's a stretch goal and you're asking for money, or asking to set aside a certain amount of the budget for it, and it's already identified as a stretch goal, then it seems, well, what's the actual goal? What's needed?
Maybe we could just define a stretch goal so that it's a little more clear in the document. I think the definition you provided is completely adequate.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I think I was just sort of, this is a goal, but I think by saying it's a stretch goal, we're acknowledging that it's going to be, difficult. But I understand what you're saying, Ms. Hiscock, about, does that make it seem like it's out of reach? If we're trying to get people to back it. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that, but,
Well, we have a lot of other, sorry,
No, I would just say on the stretch goal, I guess, there were the two, number,
2 and 17 is what I
kind of
noted.
aspiring to have 6% of all of our housing stock to be affordable, and then
1.65
the amount.
budget.
I mean, how would people feel if we just called them all goals?
Yeah.
I mean, all of these are
The other-
ambitious.
yeah.
Accomplishing all 20 would be very ambitious, right? But I think that's the marker we're putting out there, of what the community,
yeah, I mean, I would be fine.
That was what I was trying to articulate. I think, the other 18 may also be stretch goals, depending on what revenue we have, what land we have, what development we have. There are many things we can't control. It's just stating where we would like to be. So I would ask that for number 2 and number 17, we just take out stretch, it's just as a goal. And we're defining them as goals.
Right.
But for some reason, I didn't notice that before, and I've been participating for
Yeah,
years,
yeah.
so I apologize, but that did strike me.
Yeah.
And I wasn't in that meeting.
Well, I
It just
think 'cause
struck me when I was
the-
rereading it for this meeting.
Yeah, the council members just said they had never heard us use that term before when we're setting goals for things, so.
H-sected.
HSAC,
Okay,
sorry,
got Do
sorry.
you have a thought?
Do we have anything, because I think Vice Mayor Hiscott really laid out a few minutes ago, if we're going to keep all these goals, I think we have to state that the circumstances may change, funding may not be available, and that while they're goals, we have to take into account many other potential issues as well. And does that sort of language appear anywhere in the current document? I thought it did in the document that we last saw, maybe as redlined, and I'm not sure whether we can maintain that language or not.
If it's okay with the council, I can go ahead and double check the document, and if it's not in there, I can go ahead and add it. And if it's in there, I can just point it out for next time.
Right, and it only needs to be stated once, and if we're going to remove the term stretch goals, as we've talked about, then I just think we need just a statement of context here, that these are goals, but we have a number of competing goals that we have to adjust as circumstances change.
Sounds good to me.
I mean, I would say that's a general premise for most things in the comp plan, right? Like the environment will
uh-huh.
change, right?
Yeah, let's just, because these goals are very ambitious and I share them, but I'm also reluctant to make promises that circumstances may prevent me from keeping. Totally.
So the consensus
So-
I heard is to remove the term stretch from the two and then make sure there's language with kind of this caveat that obviously it's dependent on the environment, the budget, the circumstances of how we can accomplish all these and the sequencing and the timing too.
Right, so
Yep,
if you look
yep.
at that goal 17, it practically says that in there. You just take out the,
In consideration of other city funding obligations.
just say Affordable Housing Fund to 1,650,000 in consideration of other city funding, or whatever.
Obligations.
Not in consideration of, I guess.
Well, I think that point, I think maybe what Mr. Snyder was saying is that all of these are under consideration of city
True.
funding obligations.
Yes,
That's the
yes,
same
yes,
for
yes.
transportation,
True,
CIP,
true, yeah.
you know, that's the same
Right.
for everything.
So we just,
So if we want to put a blanket, take that and put it at the top,
Or is it
or make a
intro,
blanket statement
introduction?
and it's an intro, I think that it accomplishes the intent that these are our, this is what work has been put out there, these are the goals of the community, and we understand,
Right.
we want to achieve them, but
Yeah.
there are
I
other
would
factors.
just say on that same point that, yeah, I agree with Dave. In looking at this again, and I know we had the conversation about it, and I'm committed to all these different goals, but I do think that there's, in the introduction, sort of that contextual statement that's missing, that didn't sort of make it in, or made it in only in certain goals that talk about like the associated public service costs, or that, you know, depends on sort of, you know, further community input or further X, Y, and Z, that kind of like overall piece of it should be in the introduction and like not sprinkled in certain goals, because it goes to like the whole body of the document overall, so that it doesn't come across as prescriptive as it might otherwise be read to be. Like, we all understand what it means in the context in which we are adopting it, but I think reading it on the face of the document, that's not as clear as it should be.
can staff take the takeaway that somewhere in the introduction, we have a preamble to that effect? Okay. Laura, do you have anything else?
Yeah, so one was just a comment. It was about priority goal 9, and I know we're not here to talk about necessarily the contents of this because we've been talking about it, but just, you know, one of the things I was thinking about was, you know, the time like years ago when Pearson Square really contributed to enrollment growth. So I think as a council, just you know, I understand why we have that in there, and it's, you know, it's important to make our great schools available to, you know, all families, but we just need to keep an eye and be, you know, in working closely with the schools as on enrollment, and, you know, just, you know, if we start seeing upticks, just keeping that in mind. But my only other comment was priority goal 12. Which was expanding unhoused services or year-round. Oh, no, I'm saying expand house. What I wanted to bring up was, you know, could the city look at perhaps having our shelter open in July and August? So I know, you know, to go straight from just during the winter months to 12 months a year would be a big jump. But I think, you know, with the heat, maybe that would be a soft way to try to start to expand the services for unhoused individuals, is open it in July. And I don't know the inner workings of our homeless shelter, but if we could have it open July and August during those 2 really hot months, that might also alleviate some of the, you know, businesses in the post office and, you know, who have seen individuals, you know, trying to escape the heat. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But that's it for me. Thanks.
Laura, do you think it captures it? Because the language in goal 12 is it says retain or expand. So it could be expand in terms of size, expand in terms of calendar time.
Yeah, I don't.
Spelled out more specifically.
It's, you know, I don't want to, I, you know, am new to this process. I don't want to step on anyone's toes. I mean, I just remember we had talked somewhere at some point about could we ever make it 12 months a year? And I thought that might be a big jump, but that's all I was thinking was, maybe, and I don't know if we would add it in here, but I just wanted to throw that out there as maybe next year looking at having it open in July and August. So I'm not sure if this would be the appropriate place or if this is just something that, we could talk, at a later time about the feasibility of that.
When is the agreement up for, again, Wyatt? We do it every year, right?
We do it every year, and so typically it'd be before council in the September timeframe. So we'll try to engage with the Friends of the shelter. But I do think this language is pretty, could include, or doesn't need to be changed. It's sort of inclusive of those ideas.
That's exactly what I was just going to
Yeah,
say.
and that's fine with me. Thanks.
And I just would like to say that one of the things that this report attempts to achieve is to also encourage just more exploratory exercises. So goal 14, for example, improve understanding of needs along the housing continuum. This includes things like maybe a housing needs assessment for the city to undertake that would move forward with something that would explore whether or not this is something that would be valuable to the shelter and a good use of city and Fairfax County funds as well.
Just regarding number 12, does it need to say at the property yard? Can we just say retain or expand unhoused services?
It does not have to say at the property yard. I think that might have been a request in a previous,
You were asked to add it in?
I was asked that.
Oh, okay.
Or it might have been
I read it
smushed.
as, we are in the process of exploring new, ways to organize ourselves at the property yard. So I think it was somewhat probably pointed that as you're doing that reorganization and planning, make sure that this is part of that. That's the way I read it, but it is true. It could be relocated.
I don't think, does it preclude, your concern is that it precludes it from
Other
going
locations.
elsewhere?
It just struck me when you said you wanted to keep it broad, and then it specifically says the property yard.
Yeah.
With that new caveat we added at the beginning, that obviously depends on the circumstances. If we decide that it doesn't, there's a better place for it, I don't think we're constrained by this. And maybe it's a question for Sally, is how binding is this entire document?
I think maybe contextually, it's retain or expand unhoused services, the ones located at the property yard currently, is maybe kind of the phrasing of it is a little awkward, but maybe I can look at that sentence.
You could just say, retain or expand unhoused services currently located at the
Currently
property
located.
yard.
That's
Yeah,
perfect,
And then
yeah.
it captures the idea of not displacing people because of any redevelopment that happens there that people are particularly concerned about, that it's not just something that falls away. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Who else has questions or comments?
I have one comment. This is a comment on page 12 of the report. And it's more of just a question, and it's just something that I don't think was addressed. It's the graph that says percent cost by tenure. And if I'm reading this correctly, all of our cost-burdened homeowners and renters have significantly decreased between 2017 and 2022. No, that's the wrong one. It's page 12. It's the
Oh, that's the red line that throws the page numbers
section
off.
3 home ownership. Go to section 3 home ownership. So I guess a little further along. That one.
There you go.
So if you look at that smaller graph, it shows that our residents are less cost burdened in 2022 than they were in 2017. And I was really surprised to see that. I was reading along, and then I got there and went, oh, okay. So I'm wondering if there was any explanation as to why that was, or,
I'll double check that. I'll
Okay.
double check that. It doesn't make sense, and I'm wondering if the numbers got transposed or something.
okay,
I'll
Yeah,
double
okay.
check it.
the color should be
Yeah.
right.
'Cause the
right.
the renters, seems like
Read the
rent
text
has-
above. I think we just flipped the colors. The text above says between 2017, 2022, 32% of renters were cost burden, which corresponds to the, so maybe just double check that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And then 15.
Anyway, if you would just check the stats on that one, that would be good.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Others?
I will note Mr. Schneider has his hand up.
Dave?
Thanks. Thanks, Madam Mayor, could we go to page 23 of the report?
Are you looking at the clean or the red line, Dave?
I think redlined. We added something on streamlining permitting. I think I saw that. I think I have that page right.
Yeah, it's the
23.
strategy C under priority goal 10.
Yeah. So while I don't object to that, I think we should add consistent with meaningful input from the public and the planning commission.
That is goal 10. Absolutely. I can do that.
Okay, thanks.
My only question is in light of the new state statute, whether the planning commission's appropriate to insert in there, given that we don't have authority for that for certain types of,
Yeah, I know,
Process.
I hope we can address that in the future, but it consistent with meaningful public input, if you will, then, but
I'd be fine with
I
that.
think I'm, right.
Okay. Other final questions or comments? Erin?
I had just a couple, and the documents come together really well. And so one of my, I guess both of these go to new material that was added. I'm sorry if this is a little in the weeds, but on just because it's the very first paragraph of the document in the very first sentence, we say the market forces have driven up home prices, rents in the city, and it's no longer an affordable community for many families. And I think you're saying that in the context of everyone in the city, but I think based on everything in the document, we want it to be broader than sort of families, right? And that we wanted to capture both a statement about the people in the city and then who might be looking to come into the city. And so I thought, one way to capture that might be instead to say, market forces have driven up home values and rents in the city, straining resources of many residents and making the city unaffordable to many others, right? So that it's more about, can the people who are here stay here? Can the people who need to find other sort of housing to meet evolving needs in the city downsize or move into other places? And then what happens to, people who want to but can't afford to come here? And that it's not limited to the context of families, but more broadly, given all the populations we're kind of seeking to, address in the document. And then one of my other questions went to, and I went back to the staff report to try to figure out when this got injected, but the Georgia homestead exemption, because, and I think it came out in the planning commission or maybe one of their conversations, and I just have some hesitancy about choosing something so specific in a document. When I looked at it very quickly, Georgia, I don't know, their state constitution's different, they give localities a lot more, authority than we have with taxation and exemptions and everything. And I think if the point is just to say develop programs that, explore additional senior tax relief or income-based tax relief, we can just say that without pointing to specific states or programs, given that this one, it's kind of how did this come out of thin air is the one program nationwide we're pointing to in terms of the thing that we're trying to model ourselves after, where it may or may not be the best example to do so. So if you can just
genericize
look
that
in,
one.
yeah, I think there are 2 or 3 places where it ended up injected into the report, and just generalize from what the program is doing to what the goals of the program are. I think it makes more sense when we're trying to kind of have a broad-based document.
Going back to your first comment, Erin, so I read families as more broad, kind of like
Yeah.
a household kind of term, but I actually like being more deliberate in saying it is unaffordable for some who already live here and unattainable for people who can't come into the city. So I think making that distinction is important because we've often talked about how we want to welcome more people and our housing prices create this invisible wall around us. So I think actually calling that out is an important way to, as a way to set up the introduction. So I like that addition.
Okay, thanks.
Agreed on both counts.
And then just very minor, I think the reference to ADUs, the accessible dwelling unit ADUs is still to attached units. And so can we just make clear that the ordinance we passed, you know, goes to both attached and detached units? Because it was a new type of, you know, housing we expanded in the city.
I'm sorry, can you would like to,
The accessory dwelling units, so I think it's on page 18. We talk about how, you know, we allow for attached accessory dwelling units or something like that, and it doesn't capture that we just, you know, passed the ordinance to allow for detached units. So it says, the city recently passed zoning regulations for accessory dwelling units to identify standards for smaller attached units that will complement the existing housing stock. So you could say something like, additionally, the city recently passed zoning regulations to
Okay.
expand accessory dwelling units to complement the existing housing stock or to identify standards for such units. But right now it reads as though it's one type of unit that doesn't capture the other two types of accessory dwelling units we allow for,
okay,
either internal or detached now.
absolutely, we can
Yeah.
refine that a little bit.
Thanks. And then the last one I have, I think it's on goal 26. I wasn't sure why that goal in particular,
We don't have 26 goals anymore.
page 26,
Page
goal
26,
15A,
okay.
sorry. I mean, all of these, right, all of these goals are things we're trying to do, recommendations that the group as a whole thought important to take on, or at least have, like, as part of a conversation, and they will be sort of ongoing conversations. So I wasn't quite sure, like, why we needed to include the parenthetical about not recommended due to increased city revenue and politically sensitive topic. As opposed to just
Yeah, the
striking it
parenthetical.
and like leaving it as a strategy, and we can decide, like anything else here, to pursue or not pursue the strategy, given kind of where we are at different points in time.
I agree, it's kind of a strange addition, I can remove that section, or that point.
Just ended at a tax to housing.
Or I guess, would you leave it as meals tax, comma, a percentage of real estate tax, comma, percentage of
Yeah.
general fund? So still include them as examples, but without the commentary that this is not recommended. That feels like an unnecessary commentary.
Yeah.
To still include meals tax as an example, but not a,
Yeah, it was just odd, because it's there and then it's in the whole chart at the end too. And so I would prefer to just strike the language. But again, thank you overall. Appreciate all the work that went into it, and it gives us a lot to continue to work on and toward, so.
Absolutely, thank you very much.
okay, good comments. Other comments, questions?
Just echoing the thanks to both staff and to the tremendous amount of time that a lot of our residents spent on this area. We've been fortunate to have some housing experts also who this is their day job as well, beyond the committees, and staffing had a broad community participation in this process. And I think while it might have been a very long process, it made a more thorough and complete one with, many voices at the table who may historically not have been included in discussions like this. And I really think it made it a better process and hopefully a better end result, especially for those folks. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I had two comments, I think. So again, thanks staff for getting us here, and I think the change, getting this included in the comp plan, while obviously with the caveat that it's all subject to us funding it and deciding on taking on specific projects, I think it's a big deal and it's an important marker in how we've done it in the past. my comment is on goals and strategies. So obviously, there's a lot of goals and a lot of associated strategies, but are the strategies meant to be exhaustive for that goal? Or does this not preclude us from coming up with another strategy down the road that accomplishes that goal?
I don't think this would stop us from coming up with new strategies. I think
I think they're suggestive.
if we think of
Not
better things to do, either instead or in addition to, I think it
Because
makes sense.
some of these goals are pretty broad, right? Like,
For
how are you
sure.
going to get from 3 to 6%? Well, there's many ways to do that. We're listing out some suggestions on how you get there. And so I guess somewhere in there, we need to be able to say that this is not like you must just do these strategies and that's it. And maybe that's implied, but I feel like similar to that preamble that we talked about, I don't think these are meant to be exhaustive.
Could be included in the preamble that, it's based upon current economic forces, competing financial priorities, and, there are suggestions provided by this group, not intended to be exhaustive.
Yeah.
Or precluding any other suggestions that come up, because obviously things change in time. They've changed since we started this process, so I think that would be good to add in a
There might be other
point.
strategies, yeah.
There might be new strategies, or these might not make any sense by the time we get to them.
Okay. I just got alert that the cable channel's not showing the live stream. If we could look into that, please. It's showing an old July meeting right now. And this does not need to be in the document, but I think we've had enough discussions about it. I think it's important for us to think about is CCAUs, which I think we've increased significantly in the past 2 years. And I think it's important because they are deeply affordable units that the market just won't naturally produce. So 30 to 50% AMI. Like the lowest we get inside our new buildings is 60%. So I think the fact that we're providing for those deeper ones are important. I think we found that they may be more cost efficient doing it that way than trying to get them inside our new buildings. Because obviously the cost difference between a market rate brand new one versus what a 30 to 50% AMI unit is a lot. And so something for us to think about, because we started talking about cash in lieu as an option of how we might want to think about that strategy if we want more 30 to 50% units. So I throw that out there, kind of following that. My second question is, I don't need it to be listed as a new strategy, but if we are serious about providing for units below 60%, the market's just not going to produce it. And so we need to think about what's the most efficient way to do that, and should we think about cash as an option? So related to the first point about not being an exhaustive list of strategies, but I think it's, as we have upcoming, if we have upcoming projects, I think it's just important to keep in mind what our priority might be. Is those deeper affordable units or more 60% to 80% units or mix? But that's it. Any final thoughts?
I'd just like to say thank you. This is very thorough. You've heard a lot of advice from people about how to change it and combine it and organize it. And as Ms. Hardy said, I'm glad that it will be in the comp plan and will really show and symbolize that we are committed to this. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Great. Nice work, all. Please pass our thanks to the Affordable Living Policy Work Group, and the invite goes to them next week if they'd like to join us when we adopt this.
Absolutely, we'll let them know.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, council. So next on the agenda is senior tax relief, and Nikki Calaverinos is on the coach. She's the chief deputy with the treasurer's office, and she's going to lead the staff presentation on this. I will note, just as a word of explanation, that the code that we're proposing is really to implement changes that the treasurer's office has been carrying out since 2023 after a briefing of the city council on these changes. And so in some respects, we're fixing a code issue to be aligned with practice. And so Nikki, we'll turn it over to you. Thank you for being here tonight. And I think we're going to queue up Taya, just the 3 slides that Nikki has prepared for tonight, and then we'll answer any questions that council has.
Thank you, Wyatt. Good evening, council. We have submitted an amendment to the tax relief ordinance TO 25-13 to amend Chapter 40 Taxation, Article 7, tax relief for low-income elderly or permanently and totally disabled. We propose 3 changes. The first is the income chart in section 40-134, paragraph A. What you have before you is the chart that was used from 2019 to 2023 as a refresher. The next slide is the chart that started being used in 2024 and was used in 2025.
Hey, Nikki, can I
It
stop you?
ex-
Yeah,
Sure.
Can I stop you here? I guess I should know this because I was around when we changed this, but do you remember why we went to hard income limits as opposed to still keeping it at AMI percentages?
So this chart expanded the income bands. Council was interested in making it a bit more robust and allowing the income bands to be expanded so that more people would qualify for relief. And the outcome of that was that several people were able to move to the 100% relief band as a result of the implementation of this chart.
But your question
And-
also, in addition to what Nikki responded, is why not tie it to AMI?
Yes, because obviously AMI changes every year and floats, right? And so these income and generally goes higher because of wage inflation and whatnot. So why not tie it to AMI instead of hard income limits?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know, Nikki, if you do, but I am not familiar with other jurisdictions doing it by AMI either. So here's, might not be the correct response, but here's at least one response. And that is we're talking about tax relief, and it's so prescribed by state law about how you do it that I think it's helpful for us when we're administering it for it to be a hard number as opposed to something that's an AMI chart from HUD that you could argue over and it might be less clear. But that's just an initial response.
Well, and I was also thinking it's probably easier for the community to understand it, right?
Yeah.
So, if someone's trying to find out if they could qualify, I agree with you, Mayor, but I think if I was could I qualify for this, I wouldn't understand if it's a, percentage of AMI, I wouldn't understand what that meant.
And if I could just add, the AMI is annually updated and is a good foundation, but it's also indexed by family size, so it would add a little more complexity to this because it's income limit for the household versus the number of people residing in the household.
So this is for the entire household. Now I'm opening up more cans of worms.
Yes, we do base the income limit on household income.
Without adjusting. So obviously in the AMI chart, if you have a larger household, your AMI for that number of households increases, right? So it counts for that. And
Correct.
This doesn't account for it. So whether if you're a one-person household at $120,000 versus a four-person household at $120,000, your need is probably pretty different, but yet we are offering you the same tax relief. I realize we're just
Correct.
updating it to what we were, what we had made the change in 2024, but I'm just,
Close that can of worms.
yeah.
I think my memory of being on this working group is that the asset limit and the income limit is definitely what other jurisdictions, how they were doing it. And as we modeled it and changed it, that's why. And it's also something that we continue to update. So rather than having to use we're just updating it and keeping it current. I think that makes sense.
I'll try to not think about that, I guess.
I think looking at the code in it, I think that there were, and Nikki, right, when it's actually administered, it takes into account the number of people in the households, and if you're a senior in the household, but then you have other members of the household, and how much of that person's income can go toward the overall income limits and whatever else. So it's a little bit more, it's administered in a way that is a little bit more nuanced than what the chart reflects, but the chart is still helpful in kind of conveying the overall income limits and easier for the community to understand in terms of when the relief applies, is sort of how I understood it.
Looks like the city attorney would like to chime in. Sally?
Thank you, Mayor. So it looks like the authority that we're operating under doesn't specify that it has to be expressed in these hard limits, but so if council as a group decides that it would like to tie it to something that's more formulaic instead of an absolute number, just let me know and I can dig into that a little bit more. At first glance, what I'm saying is it doesn't seem prohibited to do it that way. Thank you.
I don't want to create more
So-
work, but I did feel a little weird, given that it doesn't have, the AMI does change year to year and doesn't account for household, assuming that the execution of it is not accounted for somehow. So we don't need to solve for it now, given that I think we're just trying to get our code to match what we've been doing. But that does feel like something that we updated this, what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? We do this every 5 years. So maybe when we do the next refresh, it's worth for staff to think about, is there a fairer way to accomplish both of those things we raised?
I'm making a note of that. Okay, so on the next slide, we've got some analysis for you. The total amount of tax relieved each year, 2023, 2024, and 2025. We did see a slight decrease from 23 to 24. That's because 8 households disqualified from the program for various reasons, which was offset by a gain in new applicants of 6 people. We had a slight gain in 2025, and I think the implementation of this chart did what it was intended to do, albeit in small numbers. It did expand, the expanded income bands did allow for participants to increase their relief benefit. So I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
I had one question, Nikki. Thank you for showing us the applicants who got this. As a percentage of our total number of property owners, is 39 comparable to what other jurisdictions have?
Meaning like as a ratio of our entire,
Yeah, percentage, like
Homeowners?
0.0 or whatever. Like, do we see utilization of this program in Falls Church similar to our neighbors?
Our demographics, do we have the same number?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, but I can certainly get you an answer.
And I was just adding that I think the answer to that also depends on the populations that is 65 and older. So a percentage of the population that fits within the age restriction, and then from that population, what percentage is then needing relief? So 2 components to make it a good comparison. Because anecdotally, do people move out? You know, their kids graduate and they move out. So we have a smaller number of people who are 65 and older. I don't know. I think it's changing, but that'd be a good point too.
Other questions?
Although, I guess on that one, right, it's not going to be solely like 65 population and what the jurisdiction, like how many people take advantage of a tax relief program, because it's going to be also dependent on like the tax rate, right? And like median home value and tax rate are going to affect like who's similarly situated in terms of getting relief. So, I don't know. I mean, when we're looking at it, like, yeah.
Well, I think it's just based on income and assets, so regardless of what your home value is, if you are low income and senior and your assets, you know, again, Fairfax County may have a slightly different program than ours, but like I'm curious whether our 39 as a proportion of however many seniors we have owning homes is comparable to the number of seniors getting relief elsewhere.
Yeah, I guess I just think more, I guess, yeah, I mean, I would imagine our rate could even be higher, right? Because the tax rate is higher, and so even if the income and the income limits are similar, more people may seek to take advantage of a program because the tax burden is higher on them because the tax rate is higher. So like whatever, you know, they could stretch to like X amount if the taxes were coming out at this rate, but because the taxes are several $1,000s more, then they may be more inclined to like seek the relief, right, at a higher tax bracket. But anyway.
I think we all agree the bottom line is we want to make sure that we keep as many, we develop a program that keeps as many seniors that are in that situation in the city.
Mary Beth?
Yeah, Nikki, when we're talking about seniors, and we're also talking about those that are disabled, permanently disabled, does that include military veterans?
No, this does not
This is
include
not that
military
program. Okay.
veterans. No, that's a separate state mandated program.
Okay, thanks.
We have no say in that
Mhm.
one, right?
No.
Right, but sometimes when we talk about the numbers of tax deferral, those numbers get jumbled together when we're talking about the impact of those programs. So I just wanted to make sure this was not including that. Thanks.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Justine?
This is more so relating to the last slide. I guess if, like, part of the purpose of this is to make sure that people in need can stay in the city. But regarding the asset limit, so if the asset limit isn't, I guess, obviously here including the house, which it's not, somebody could be living in a $1.5 million house, have assets of less than 500,000, and still be getting this relief, which seems a little bit contrary to like the sorts of people we want to help. If somebody has like a huge amount of land and is very wealthy in terms of their house, but maybe just doesn't have as much, as many cash assets.
And one thing I'll
So-
note that, oh, go ahead, Nikki, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to say that we do take it up to 125% of the city's average assessed value. And if that exceeds that amount, and we get that from the real estate assessor every year, and their income is less than $175,001, then they qualify for deferral only. They're not, they don't qualify for any relief or abatement.
Okay, so as long as it's, you said 120%?
125% of, yes,
sorry,
of
okay,
the
gotcha.
city's average AV. That's correct. And that is money that does come back to the city at the time that the property changes ownership.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I remember us being really excited about adding deferral because we didn't have anyone taking advantage of it or didn't offer it or something. That felt like something that,
I think that's correct. I think when you compare our approach to other jurisdictions, that sentence is an important sentence, and it does weight us towards deferral for many people who would otherwise qualify. And I think the city council in the past has affirmed that as good public policy for some of the reasons I think maybe that Councilmember Underhill was referencing.
there are questions, comments? Okay. I think we're ready to update this to match what we've been doing with kind of the note that in a couple years we should revisit the AMI versus hard income numbers.
All right, so this will be before council for first reading at your meeting next week. All
Great.
right.
Thank you for joining us, Nikki.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
The next item up is solid waste. And so we wanted to provide a report from the Solid Waste Task Force. And I have a set of slides that we'll walk through that I think will organize some of the significant policy changes that we're bringing forward with respect to how the city pays for solid waste services and propose to expand the service with a third bin for composting. Before we go through the slides, I think maybe I'm going to drive the slides. Is that what we've agreed? Okay, hold on. Let me share my screen real quickly. Okay. Will it work if I just do it on my computer? I think that'll work. Okay. So it turns out that this first week of August, we have a couple of really important people on vacation, and that includes Lonnie Marchetti, who is away today, Andy Young, who chaired the Solid Waste Task Force. He's on vacation. Amanda Brain is on vacation. So it's just me and Herb in terms of staff. Mary Catherine Chase is really crucial for the communications team, so she is here tonight. And we also have Fred Thompson, who is a member of the task force. It's great to have you here tonight. And so we'll walk through the slides and then look forward to council discussion. Oh boy. Let me make sure I can do this.
Since we've got
Okay.
room at the table, Fred, Herb, Mary Catherine, do you want to join us?
Yeah, Herb? So tonight's discussion really came out of a discussion that's been happening kind of in a more focused way since October last fall, when City Council requested some options on how we pay for solid waste. The discussion actually goes way back, much further than that, back in 2003, in the city's adopted solid waste management plan. There was a call for exploring options for pay-as-you-throw to move how we finance solid waste out of the tax rate and into a fee structure. And indeed, the city code envisions that we would have a fee structure as well, and sort of enables that. But the discussions really came to a point over the past year, and in the budget discussions, the city council asked the city manager to form a task force to work through a scope of work and then come back tonight with some recommendations. So here we are, August 4th, with recommendations. The key areas of scope of work were on the fee structure, on ideas for how we could provide senior relief from that fee. We wanted to have an implementation plan for rolling out a third cart for organics or in composting and expand that service. We wanted to work through some of the details on billing, wanted to have a communication strategy, and also review our city code and make some recommendations on amendments to that code to facilitate these policy objectives. The work of the task force, we should just be clear right from the beginning. I asked the task force to really focus on how we would implement these changes, not on whether we would implement these changes. Now, of course, in the discussion, there was robust discussion about sort of the pros and cons of these as well, but I wanted to bring a set of recommendations on how we could move forward. Now it'll be up to the city council to decide whether and how to move forward. The task force participants included representatives from the community, and they include Gabby Abruzzi, Diane Bartley, and Fred Thompson. We also had Alani Marchetti, Jody Acosta, our city treasurer, Nikki Calaverinos, who you heard from earlier tonight, Melissa Ryman on finance, Mary Catherine from communications, and Andy Young was the chair of the task force through this effort. All of the meetings were publicly noticed. They were taped. They're accessible on the city website for anybody who'd like to see the 4 meetings that the task force held. So some of the data that the task force went through. First, just trying to get a sense of kind of where people are. If we're going to talk about lowering the tax rate, which is the associated action of moving forward with a fee, kind of what are the numbers in terms of our curbside solid waste customers that fit into different valuation brackets in terms of the assessed value of homes. The point of this is that in terms of that bell curve, 82% of our property owners, homeowners in the city, are in that range of $750,000 and $2 million in terms of the value of their homes. And that's worth keeping in mind when we look at some of the trade-offs between the fee and the reduction in the annual tax bill. So then another important question is, if we're going to have a fee, what costs would be covered by the fee? And the task force considered various different options of what would be in and what would be out. So really kind of the core is the contract that we have with ADS, and that has 2 big components to it. One is the trucks driving down the street to go to everyone's house to pick up the trash. That's the curbside collection fee, and that's $650,000. Then the other really big component is when they take it to the waste-to-energy plant, what does it cost? We call it the tipping fee. What does it cost for the truck to unload all that material at the facility? And that's a per tonnage charge, $210,000 for that. The composting program to carry that forward in the ways that we'll describe in just a moment, $90,000. Direct staff costs for curbside delivery, $145,000, and then general overhead and administrative costs. The expansion of the organics cart is an additional $51,000. So we come to just under $1.2 million in terms of the cost that we're trying to capture with a fee. So the bottom line for the fee structure recommendation is to have a two-tiered fee that would be based on the refuse cart size. And it's really important. Potentially there'll be 3 bins, the recycling bin, the organics bin, and the refuse bin. What you would pay as a fee would be tied only to the size of your refuse bin. So a 35-gallon or a 65-gallon. What we're recommending is that the difference between the charge between those two is based on your fixed costs that are going to be paid no matter how much trash you throw away, such as the cost of the truck going to your house, versus your variable cost, which is sort of the cost derived from how much are you actually putting out on the curb. We want to have we're recommending this fee because we would like to have a financial incentive for people to throw away less. And that's why this policy has been included in the solid waste management plan at least since 2003 and in the 2024 version that the city updated just last year. The task force considered some other options. They considered a flat fee for everyone as an option. They went with a variable fee. They also considered an incentivized variable fee. In other words, having the 35-gallon fee actually lower than just the variable costs, and sort of to really provide sort of a greater incentive to choose that 35-gallon cart. That means that the 65-gallon cart needs to be commensurately higher. They chose to not do that, but to tie it really directly to those fixed costs and variable costs. And then a third option they explored was a fee based on property assessed value. The thought was to tie this to the refuse cart size in order to have that price incentive and to try to accomplish the policy objectives that are in the solid waste management plan. Legal guidance for a fee structure, for a fee for service, is to have that nexus between the costs of the service and the fee should be rationally related to those costs, or at least fairly debatable in terms of standards that you typically have for a legal assessment of the fee. So what would that fee be? The bottom line, to cover the cost, the 35-gallon cart would be an annual fee of $355, and the 65-gallon refuse cart would be an annual fee of $390. Now, at the same time the City Council will be considering that fee, the City Council on the same night would be considering a reduction in the real estate tax rate of 1.8 cents. That's the equivalent, so that this is revenue neutral to the city. And so while it is revenue neutral to the city, there are disparate impacts for homeowners based on the assessed value of your house and based on the size of the cart that you choose. And so the numbers below show, sort of generally speaking, if you are in a condo, say, or a townhouse with a $550,000 assessed value, then the impact of that reduced real estate tax rate is less relative than it is for someone in a more expensive home, but the fee is the same, and whether you're in an expensive home or in a less expensive home. And so that's why there's sort of that gradation of impacts. Within the bell curve, again, sort of the majority of the properties are going to be in that net impact if you have the 65-gallon refuse cart between a $255 increase per year to a $30 increase per year, sort of in that sort of where 82% of the properties reside. Or if you have the 35-gallon cart, you'd have a $220 increase in your net annual costs, or a $5 decrease in your net annual costs for the 35-gallon cart option. We can come back to that if there are questions on this. The task force spent a lot of time sort of going through these numbers and trying to understand this picture. With the tax rate reduction itself, just to remind the City Council, what you adopted back in May was a rate of $1.20. And so what will be before you next week after, after tonight's work session discussion, what we're recommending is a tax rate of $1.18.2. We talked before, back in May, it was at $1.20, it was a 4.7% increase in the tax bill for your median homeowner. That would be reduced to a 3.2% tax increase for your median homeowner with that reduction. So now shifting to fee relief, we talked earlier tonight about senior tax relief. What we're recommending to implement fee relief is to essentially follow the procedures and the application process for senior tax relief for your real estate tax. And if you're eligible for that, then you're eligible for a full abatement of the fee, and to administer it that way. That is, when we kind of survey jurisdictions, we see that that is frequently the approach that's taken. There are some variations on the theme, and so the truth is there is some flexibility for the City Council if you want to expand some other options or to explore some other options. What we would say, though, however, if we're going to administer that this year, we need to get the tax roll set, and we need these applications formed really, in September. And so a more expansive fee relief program, we would ask that that be something we look at over the course of the next 12 months for implementation next year. But this year, follow the senior tax relief procedures. If we do that, there's currently 44 participants in the real estate tax relief program. Of those, 29 are solid waste customers. The net impact, we think, if those 29 got full fee relief, would be about $11,500. And so in a budget amendment, we would appropriate from the general fund funds to cover a fee relief program of that size. The Treasurer's Office would be working this fall and have an updated form so people could navigate that process, no later than October 31st. So now we'll shift to the third bin, the organics recycling cart. So the recommendation here is that we do move forward. We offer a third bin for all of our customers of curbside collection, and we would have an opt-out procedure. So if we don't hear from you, you're going to get the third bin. If you do contact us, you can opt out. Now we'll talk a little bit more about that, sort of the details of that implementation. What you can put in the cart is both yard waste and your food waste from your kitchen. That's how Arlington County does it. That's how other jurisdictions are doing it now. It would all be hauled to the Convertus composting facility in Prince William County. That's where our yard waste debris goes today. They have different ways of treating compost, mulch. They produce a range of soil amendments products, and so that's the way that would work. This is the one that's really driven by the solid waste management plan. We think we can take really significant strides in reducing our waste stream that goes to the waste to energy plant and really encourage the reuse of these organics and make, I think, a significant step forward with this program. One other note, we would keep the composting program here at City Hall so that the entire community can bring their organics to that, continue to do that as they currently can. So some of the costs associated with the organics recycling cart, here's our estimates right now. The bottom line is that there'd be a net new cost to implement this program of $51,000. And so that's would be covered in the proposed fee structure that we've mentioned earlier. And that's the net cost after the fact that we currently spend $90,000 of tax money to support the existing composting program through the compost crew. So the timeline for this, with a lot of our communication strategy would be triggered on what the council ultimately decides to do, but we would, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but we would, if this does move forward on first reading, that's where the Office of Communications really step up our communications campaign to let the public know about this and what is coming. And so that first reading would be an important point for us to ramp that up. We would have the opt-out process from September through October of 2025 after that communications campaign. We'd have a budget amendment for the carts, and a contract authorization with ADS to take the third bin, to take those organics to the Prince William station. And then we'd order the carts in 2 tranches, and that is to avoid a situation where we either over-order or under-order. So if we do it in 2 tranches, we make our first order based on all the feedback we've gotten for the opt-outs. We'll roll those out. If we hear from people that more people want to opt out or more people want to opt in, once the carts actually show up for half the city, then we'll adjust our second order accordingly to avoid having too many carts or too few. This would be a phased-in approach, and we want to be in a situation where everybody, all of our customers would have that third bin by the end of the fiscal year. The yellow sticker program, bottom line with that is we propose to keep it basically as is. Right now you can buy a yellow sticker from the treasurer's office or from Giant. They're $1 each, and you put those on your excess trash bags or yard debris for pickup. We're hopeful that with the third bin, there'll be less need for these, particularly for yard debris, because you can put that in the third bin every week. So billing, we're recommending that the real estate tax bill be the vehicle for assessing the solid waste fee. That's the way that many other jurisdictions do it. Not all, but a good number of our neighbors do it that way. We think that's the most administratively feasible. But we do need a decision really by September in order for that to be included in the bills that would be mailed out in November. Now, here's something that's very important. That 2-tier fee, the 33-gallon or the 65-gallon, we would go with what people have today. For people to change their 65 or their 35-gallon refuse cart, that would be something that would carry out over the course of the next year. And next year, that would be shown, is where it would show up in your bill if you wanted to switch. That's part of an administrative feasibility issue. The treasurer needs to have a clean data set early so that she can get the bills out. We did look at could it go on the water bill, and Fairfax Water was not willing to do that. Could it go through ADS? We have some concerns about that, mainly from just a collection issue, but also for the customer. And then you've got another bill you've got to deal with, and so the tax bill we think is administratively feasible and the most convenient for our customers. So communications. One, I want to thank the task force. The task force really leaned in on the goal to communicate what they were looking at. They wrote letters. They were interviewed by the media. So I want to really thank our task force members for embracing that really important part of the work. So these are all kind of listing of the things that have happened so far, including the yard signs that you see various places around the city, advertising in our local newspaper with full-page ads. And we really kind of crank things up, again, with first reading being sort of the inflection point to make sure that the public knows what the city council is considering. We have a draft FAQ. We'll have kind of a whole campaign, and Mary Catherine can give you more details on that. So that the public knows what the council is considering, and then if this is all approved on second reading, so that people know what they can do moving forward. So the last thing we'll cover is updates to the solid waste code, and those are all just to implement the things that we've discussed, and we can go through those in detail. Really, everything that I've just discussed shows up in the code, and we tried to be make as few changes to that code as possible just to implement the things that we've discussed. And then the budget amendment, in terms of the total budget amendment request, it would be $193,000. The largest part of that would be for the organics carts purchase, $144,000. What we would propose to finance that is that we charge that to their capital reserves. We take it basically out of capital reserves and have the fee pay the capital reserves back over the next 4 years, $36,000 a year to do that. There are some contract costs, for instance, with compost crew. They would stay on over 6 months as we transition folks off of compost crew and onto ADS for the third bin. And then the solid waste fee relief, $11,500. So a total of $193,000 for a budget amendment. So just to sum up, I won't read all of the, well, maybe I will. Should I sum up? Do you want me to sum up? Are you all tired of hearing from me? A two-tier fee, and that would be based on the refuse cart size, either the 35-gallon or the 65-gallon. And we're gonna have to explain this multiple times. It has nothing to do with your recycling cart size, has nothing to do with whether you choose to opt in or opt out of the composting bin. The fee is gonna be based on your refuse cart. Fee relief, follow our senior tax relief program. Roll out the organics cart. Really, it'll be between January and June with a rollout by sort of 4 sectors of the city. And then the new fee would show up in the real estate tax bill, along with a reduction in the tax rate, and the bill that you would be mailed in November, and a very strong communications campaign throughout the entire of this fiscal year, so the public is well informed about these changes and what they can do to participate in this program. I think that is it, and now look forward to any questions and discussions from council.
Great. I'm sure we'll have questions. So first of all, thank you to our resident members of the task force as well as staff. I watched all your meetings online and joined you all for your last one, so really appreciated how thorough and thoughtful you all were. You really took to heart, I think, the scope of work in the charter and making sure we talk about how we could do this, analyzing all the different considerations, thinking about it in a fair way, the communication strategy. So appreciate how well the task force worked, especially in a really short amount of time. I think for some, this has been a 30-plus year problem, but for us, I guess it's been 9 months, and so we really appreciate the sprint at the end to get the task force involved and really dig in. So thank you for that. Let's start with questions, because I think there's a lot of content in your presentation, Wyatt. So we'll start with questions, and then we'll do like maybe comments or reactions or next steps, I think, after that, just to make sure we're all on the same page about understanding all the details of the staff and the task force recommendation. So questions. Okay, Mary Beth?
Just start, Mr. Shields, our contract with ADS, does it include the emptying of community trash cans? One of the things the task force discussed was when they talked about leaf pickup, just that leaf pickup is a community benefit, and that should not be included. So the trash cans that are next to CVS or throughout the community, are they Parks and Rec staff empties them, or are they ADS?
Mr. Holmes, do you know if the task force, or if Lonnie carved out those trash cans from the ADS pickup costs?
So no, those costs were not. That's a total separate service. Those costs were not carved out. We have looked at something like that, but it wasn't feasible at the time, so we left those alone. So those really, so Park and Rec handle some of those, and then ADS handles some of those in some of our new parklets and along the streets that you see Washington and Broad. But those have nothing to do with this program as it stands right now.
Okay, so the cost of those then are still divided amongst everyone in the community?
That's correct.
Within the tax rate? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Shields sent us a very nice email describing where the organics are going. And when we do get to a communications plan, I think the community would really be intrigued to read about that company, because it was a good description of where they're going and what they do with the organic waste. I had a comment from just a community member who was very concerned that this is a slippery slope, and that if we start to peel out different pieces of the tax bill, then all of a sudden we're going to end up with saying, well, this group pays this, and this group pays this, and this group pays this. I know this is different. Can you explain exactly why it's different? And maybe that could be part of the communications plan too, so that people understand that it's in our code and that it really is a different kind of fee.
I do think solid waste is different from most municipal services. When you look around the country, I think that most do have a fee. It is typically your smaller jurisdictions that maybe don't have it. So, for instance, the town of Vienna, I think, has it in the tax rate, and some of the other smaller jurisdictions don't. So that's, I think, the reason why the city has not moved towards a fee, even though it has been called for in our policy documents and as something to explore, and it has been envisioned in our city code as well. The policy reason for moving for a fee is to provide, this is very much a service that you can break out. We contract it out, and having that price incentive for people to conserve more and throw away less, I think is the undergirding of the public policy reason why it's been in our solid waste management plan for 20-plus years.
Okay. That's just one of those that I think people, as we try to explain it to people, I just want to make sure that that is clear, that it really isn't a slippery slope where someone says, well, I've never needed the fire department, or, you know.
I think the nuance is that, like, should you have a fire, the fire department will come to your
Right,
house.
yeah,
But
sure.
if you're in a condo, we don't service them, and so it's
Right.
a different kind of service. It doesn't feel like an à la carte kind of
I know,
government.
but are there
model.
other things that could get rolled into this? And I don't think there are, but there might be, that could in the future be, well, we don't get snow plowing on our street, therefore we shouldn't pay for snow plowing service, or whatever it is. So that's
It'd be
just.
good to be prepared as an FAQ, because that's
Yeah.
not, I'm sure you're not the only one who's heard that
Yeah,
slippery slope concern,
exactly.
so.
No, I think we've all heard that one.
Wyatt, you had a statement before to that effect, and I can't remember how you said it, but you didn't articulate it just now. You've articulated it in the past to say that these are services that are available to everybody. So schools are available to everybody. You can, have children or not have children. You can send your kids to private school. You can send them to public school. It was another meeting we had where you articulated it really well as to why you wouldn't then be peeling off individual things from a tax rate.
Well,
Yeah.
it-
Do you remember that? There was just
Yeah.
it's not coming to me right now, but there's a better explanation of why we wouldn't then be looking at, okay, I don't use the schools, I don't have kids, therefore I don't have to pay for schools, or I don't drive on that road, therefore I don't have to pay that, or I don't have snow
Right.
plowing, or I'm never gonna use the library, so I don't wanna pay for the library.
It's, one thing's unique about solid waste is that we define who we serve with curbside service and who we don't serve. And so in terms of the reason for that is that single-family homes and townhouses are all very homogeneous in terms of the service that's needed, whereas multifamily are very heterogeneous in terms of the services they need. And so we've chosen not to be in that business. That's a very complicated business to get into. And so this is a service that there are residents in the city that they can't access it because of the housing type that they're in. And there are probably other examples where that exists. It's just you kind of have to search in your mind for a while to think of what they possibly could be, and many of them are probably arguable, whereas this one sort of by policy, we've defined who can access the service and who can't.
Maybe that was just it, who can access the
Yeah,
services.
yeah, I think that's the right way to describe it.
It's that, like, the service is available to the property. So it's not about, like, who's living in the property. It's like, you may not take advantage of schools, but if another family comes in and they want to take advantage of schools, the property allows them to take advantage of the service. But for condos, for example, the property type doesn't allow, like, they're not receiving the service. It's not about who's in the household at any point in time. It's like what runs with the property itself.
I'm sure Mary Catherine can articulate all of that
Yeah.
in one easily digestible FAQ.
And then the use of the word refuse is, we all know what it means, but if we're trying to translate it for the public, maybe trash is the better word, because when you first read that, it is confusing, and if we want to make sure people know this is the bin that we're counting, then trash is an easier thing.
And one thing
for
you
it to-
see is, like at restaurants and stuff, like they'll say is, this is for the landfill, this is for
Right.
recycling. And since we have to say, this is for the waste-to-energy plant, it's longer and it's
Yes,
more
yes.
complicated, and you get people
Yes.
confused with that as well.
Yes.
but-
That's all I have for now, thanks.
Okay.
Go on questions.
Yeah.
Well, picking up on that, I was reading some of the online, comments and on, different neighborhood groups, and one stated that And this is a question that these condos do have the ability to have trash service. They just don't use the trash service, but that's not correct, right?
Yeah, the city is not set up to provide multifamily properties with solid waste services. And early in the discussion, council asked that we look into that, and we really struggled with that, and we did not come up with a good solution for that.
Right, and a lot of that is because, and I think this article was saying that people could access the trash services. I mean, I'm just imagining the logistics of trying, you know, I guess this article was saying, well, they would need to use the same bins that single-family homeowners use. So then it just sort of becomes a logistical issue. Well, how is someone living in a condo gonna then like haul their trash down to a bin and then bring it to the, you know, so they're just, I guess technically, yes, but logistically, it doesn't seem like it would really make sense. And then I know the newer mixed-use developments also have a lot more commercial in them, so then you have that whole piece of it, so. So that's, I didn't think that was the case, but I guess technically you could, but again, is it really feasible for someone living on the 5th floor to be dragging down into a great cart and then pulling, you know, I'm not sure.
Last winter, when we talked to some of the condos, they also really liked their service because
Right.
they got service, say, 3 times a week, and the city would not be able to offer that.
Right.
And they liked being able to negotiate their contracts as part of their HO fees, and so there was besides the feasibility, whether the city would be able to serve those buildings, the condos themselves already have structures that they didn't want changed.
Right. And then my only other question is, so if with the tax reduction, well, I guess I have 2 other questions. One was with the tax reduction, so then commercial entities would also benefit from that tax reduction, correct? And then how will that affect our bottom line?
So it's revenue neutral to the city, but for different classes of property, there's disparate impacts. So for commercial properties, they will just receive a reduction in the tax rate. They will not pay the fee, and that's the impact on them.
But I'm saying, I guess, is that going to make a big difference for us down the road in terms of budget?
Well, no, I mean, it's revenue neutral.
Okay, so when you say revenue neutral, that also took into account
Yeah,
that reduction in what we're getting from the commercial
Yeah.
properties? Okay.
that's right.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is, some of the opinions I was reading were talking about how, you know, this seems like we're rushed. You had made the point that it was hard we can't have people switch from a bigger cart to a smaller cart because of the timing issue. But my understanding from my colleagues too is one of the reasons not just the bills and all that, but also we're in a financial position where we can do that tax rate cut now because we know what our financial situation is. So that's sort of why we're looking at doing this now and not kicking it down the road. Would that be correct?
I think timing is feasible for the council. If you want to consider this now, we can implement these changes if a decision is made by September 8th. If you get past that, it will be difficult to administer this year associated with the tax rate reduction.
Right, but I think that was my point, is that's part of why, to some,
That's
it
right.
may seem like it's rushed, but that's also because we know we can get that tax rate in now. We don't know what's down the road in terms of the budget and possible tax reductions. Okay, that's it for my questions, thanks.
Okay. Other questions, Erin?
Well, we have this slide up about the program costs, and I'll just preface all of this to say, I am okay moving to a fee for service like curbside collection. I have some questions sort of about this particular implementation and sort of the composting aspect starting this year, when really, like, we're talking about it not starting for 6 months at a minimum. And I think there are some, like, issues with the composting aspect of this that maybe haven't been fully examined or developed yet. But I do have questions about this slide. So maybe, can you walk me through thinking on sort of transferring all of these costs? So I think when we started talking about this and what I had expected to see was like the curbside collection fee and the tipping fees sort of, being transferred to a fee-for-service model. I did not necessarily expect, and let's remove composting for a minute, because I think it depends kind of how you think about the composting program or when you would implement the composting program. I did not expect to see sort of the direct staff cost or the overhead administrative cost being transferred. And I have a little bit of concern about the direct staff cost in particular, because I didn't understand a one full-time employee to be totally going toward, like, that we have one full-time employee totally dedicated to the curbside collection. I thought that employee was going to different sort of services. And I also have concerns once you start fly specking to a degree where it's like, which employees are doing what things, because I think you could start to say, well, there are probably employees who spend most of their time, servicing sort of commercial properties. And so why is it that me as X person is paying for those sort of employee costs when the employee is never doing something relevant to the service that I'm getting as like a residential taxpayer? So I would prefer not to start seeing staff costs at sort of a jurisdiction our size, with the city staff the size as it is, and the need to sort of be nimble in what people are doing based on kind of what the needs of the city are and the budget and like where we need to use people, then sort of putting the staff cost into the cost shifted collection sort of fees. And for me, it's important because I think we're also talking about like, what is the overall amount that we're moving out of the general fund and imposing as a fee, and sort of at a year when we know that the implications of increasing fees on people may be felt more drastically than even in other years. I think we should be particularly mindful about like how many of the things we pull out of the general fund and put into the fee-based model. So that's question one, on sort of $195,000 of that 196, because I think that's what's getting us to even a like larger tax reduction than the 1.5 we were originally sort of anticipating.
So I think that, one, the task force did look at this kind of extensively, and I think here the test is the rational nexus of the cost to the fee, and I think this also is kind of in the realm of the fairly debatable. And I think you're raising a good debatable point about some of those costs. I think ultimately this is a city council decision, is the bottom line. I think the curbside collection, the tipping fees, and everything associated with organics is just an extraordinarily strong case for rational nexus to the fee. I think the staff and the overhead administration are fairly debatable.
That's why I put it out there for like that reason.
Can I comment on that? You have other questions probably?
Yeah,
So just go, yeah, no, I actually, I think that's a good point in that staff member also is responsible for coordinating the city hall, compost, all of that bin, and coordinating, to your point, Herb, the contracts around the city for parklets and street trash cans, and that does have a community-wide benefit. You mentioned that too. So both of those points have kind of raised questions in my mind too about that.
And even like the recycling extravaganza is under that staff person. There are other things.
Like
Is it just one
community-
staff person, or is it like 0.5, 0.5?
Community cleanup.
Yeah. It's one person.
The DRC, so like when those comment review for like special exceptions and site plans and whatever come through, I frequently see like this staff member also providing comments on those things. And so I don't think that I don't think it makes sense to fully transfer the cost. And I don't know, fundamentally like kind of don't totally think it makes sense as an approach to do it that way.
guess I'm curious what the task force discussion was on this.
Well, I think, we relied on the advice of the staff, and we felt the general principle should be that the staff, the resources, all of the implications that serve these 3,000 households should be incorporated in a fee. And that it shouldn't, there may be, the question then becomes, how easy is it to do that? Do we have a time reporting system that gives us the detail of exactly what the employee is doing? Is it 80% versus 63%? I don't think we know. I'm not sure if the city could easily answer that question. So the issue is that we had to find some framework where we could afford that general principle, that if this is a service only available to 3,000 people, then the work and effort that goes into serving those people should be paid for in that fee. That was the general principle that we agreed on, I think, as a group. And I think in terms of digging down deeper to understand the components of that, I think we came to the conclusion that we had what information we could have right now. This can improve and should change over time. The goal would be to get a system that works, that it appropriately affects and includes the total cost of the program, and then look for ways over time to improve it and to reduce it. The goal really, as you talked about programmatically, is to reduce the amount of trash that's thrown out, to send more to the pipeline for composting, to incentivize those kinds of things, and hopefully the whole program would be managed in a way that brings costs down to everybody.
Okay. So how do people feel about taking 195 out, I guess, before we move on to other questions? It'd be the direct staff cost of 145 and then overhead admin cost of 50,000. Do people have opinions, thoughts?
I would tend to agree with Aaron. I hadn't thought about it that way, but now that I'm processing that it makes sense. Would that change the amount of would it go from 1.8 to 1.6 or 1.7?
I think it would go to 1.5.
It would go back down to 1.5?
Then
And then
$1
the-
million is your cost that you
Right.
would then have to translate into pennies.
Got it.
We can run those numbers and share that with council, well before the meeting, so you would see it. My memory from the past, it would be 1.5, but it might be 1.6, I can't recall. And then the fee would be reduced as well. But we'd use the same principle of just trying to have the variable part of it be the delta between the 35 and the 65 unless directed otherwise.
I'm guessing the fee would go down like $10, so it wouldn't be significant. So the driver, I think, is less, for me, the driver is less about like trying to get the fee as low as possible, because I don't think the fee would be that different from 350 and 390 or so, I think was the recommendation.
Well, it's
Maybe
about
down-
20, it's
Be
between
300.
15 and 18% of the fee, so, of the cost that we're trying to cover, so,
In my mind, it might also change, what I think is also a little odd, so I understand the like proxy of the 35 gallon and the 65 gallon. It did, looking at this, sort of push me toward more of a like, we should have a pay-as-you-throw system and not a like 35 and 65, but I get that we're like using those as proxies for how much you get rid of, though like, I don't know that, like for the 60 cents savings a week or something, that's the differential between the 35 gallon and the 65 gallon. When you actually do it over 52 weeks, it only turns out to be like a 67 cents difference based on like the size of your gallon, right? So it's not doing like that much of incentivizing, and someone might say, I'd rather throw one bag in like my 65 gallon bin and not have someone produce a 35 gallon bin of plastic for me to put the same amount of trash in a smaller bin. You can think about it in different ways, but I think that if you remove the 195, the differential in terms of like the fixed costs, the amount of the fee that's the fixed cost is going to decrease, and so you may actually find that the proportion is bigger between the difference is bigger between the 35 gallons and the 35 gallon, because more of the tipping fee is more proportionate in the overall cost than the collection fee, if that makes sense. So I think that it's actually going to do work to separate maybe what the 35 gallon and the 65 gallon difference is, then sort of they're being closer together cost-wise because there are more fixed costs in the overall amount right now.
If my math is right, it's about $50 decrease. So 16% change in the total cost, so that's roughly 300 and 350 or so for the two new fees. Okay, other questions? Sounds like we have potential agreement. I heard 3, 4 maybe? Well, I think before leaving that one, just so that we had, staff had some direction, I think we had agreement to take that up. Okay. Erin, do you
There
have
were,
other
yeah, I
questions?
had some others. So Winter Hill, right, it seems as though they don't, like a lot of people there may have been a decision to forego bins at all and to only have bags. And so is the staff and task force recommendation that people should basically think of their bags as the equivalent of a 35-gallon
That's-
bin, but they don't have to do the storage of the bin?
That's exactly right.
Okay. And then for Falls Chase, there were separate questions about, there is apparently some like bin sharing that already happens over there. So how would that get assessed? Is that going to be looked at differently? Like you may actually be overall increasing the amount of bins than what is currently there because of the bin sharing program we've allowed them to have. I don't know.
I think that's going to be something we'll just have to work out. I don't know that we need policy on that. I think the policy is going to be they're going to be charged the $35 fee or kind of whatever on paper they have. I don't think if you share a bin, you're going to get out of the fee.
Right. So, I mean, that's what I mean. I think this gets back to like, ultimately, I think we still need to do more work toward a pay-as-you-throw system because this is like a very crude way of differentiating between people and what they, because, you know, you're saying we're going to assess everyone the lower fee, but some people should conceivably only really be paying half of a 35-gallon fee based on like their practices right now. And I get that like implementation-wise, that's hard to do. But it does make me think that like if in 2003 we were talking about a pay-as-you-throw system, seeing sort of how the crude model hits the page, I think we need to do like, I get moving now to this version of fee-based service, but I think we do need to do like more work toward a overall pay-as-you-throw system if we truly want to like incentivize the behavior as opposed to just saying like, this incentivizes the behavior, because I don't totally know that it does.
Yeah, my recollection is the city of Charlottesville has probably one of the fullest pay-as-you-throw programs in the Commonwealth of Virginia that I'm familiar with, and Herb and Lonnie might know some others. But that I would suggest that that moving to a fee kind of creates a platform where the community can have these conversations a little bit more easily in the future. When it's in the tax rate, you kind of have to first get over that hurdle. So I guess that'd be my response. One last thing, I'll give a little bit of a defense to the 35-gallon fee for the people who just get the bags. What they get is 2 stickers per week. And I think that's very equivalent to what will fit in a 35-gallon bin, so I think it's actually pretty equivalent. Now, if they don't use them all, then they're like everybody else, where they might not fill up their bin, every week. But
Okay. Just to comment on that, the ESC, we talked extensively about where, ideally we would like the program to go and, closer to Charlottesville style program or their European programs where you actually get your trash weighed and you have to pay by how much it weighs, and that really starts to incent people. Obviously, we're a long way from that. I'm not suggesting we're going to do that anytime soon, but to your point, like an iterative process to then see how you can continue to incent people to reduce that financially, because they wanted more of a difference between the 35 and 65 to the point of like, is that a financial incentive? 60 cents a week, is that enough of a financial incentive to do that? And maybe it is just more of an I don't want to say moral incentive, but like an operational incentive to have that as a goal when you see a smaller bin. I don't know, but I'm agreeing with you in that this should be an iterative step. And I saw Fred nodding too. I know you guys discussed that.
I think that you
second thing about that is it does allow you to manage, incentivize, disincentivize different behavior. I mean, we looked at what some other areas have done. Like Fairfax City doesn't have any fees, just picks up everything that anybody throws out. It's not a managed system, and they can't drive, they're not encouraging composting. They're encouraging it verbally, but they're doing nothing to actually encourage it. They're not really reducing volume. They pick up everything. There's no incentive to reduce volume. So a fee has multiple objectives, and the one objective, yes, get the people who get the service to pay for the service, and also to allow a structure to manage it. And I would say that we didn't walk out of this process thinking that we had built the final end and perfect system. We talked about the broader range of, charging more for 65 and less for 35, but I am concerned that without having some experience, that will be grossly gained, that people will end up throwing more bags out and creating more problems than if they stay with the basic structure and we were able to see it. This was actually reducing or changing behavior. And that's really the first year of this to me, is to see, does this change behavior? Do we get different results? And then you can change, we can expand the program to reduce charges for people who have only a small bag, or there are other things that can be done over time. This should be a program that continuously improves, I think. And that was kind of where we came out, is that, yeah, we could come up with 1,000 different ideas, but I'm not sure we could come up with the absolute perfect idea without getting some real world experience.
No, yeah, and I appreciate all of that. I'm just saying sort of where we are, like, why I understand where we are and where we landed, but like ultimately where we probably need to move, seeing kind of how some of this plays out and some of the, I think, community questions. And I think, as you say, like the community will drive this in part because they'll say, like this doesn't totally make sense. We might want to move to something that's even like that better captures our actual behavior than like the bin itself.
Does anyone actually, so I looked up Charlottesville's program. They don't actually weigh your trash. They sell you 2 different stickers, one for 13 gallons, one for 32 gallons, and then they also give you an option to do an annual decal based on the size of your bin. So if you don't fill up your bin and you paid for the decal, you're still paying for the size of the bin. So no one's actually weighing your trash in terms of true pay-as-you-throw model, from what I know. I mean, other than maybe some Europeans.
There's some Europeans that
I think the Japanese also do this, where you have to like bring your trash.
You have to bring it to a place, weigh it, and pay to have it removed. And
Yeah.
that really incents people to not have to
Yeah.
cart their trash.
Yeah. But this is a big step change if we do this already. And then, I mean, my hope is that we actually have an option that's beyond one day, beyond 35 gallon. Like if you actually do such a good job and don't even need 35 gallons, maybe you have a 20-gallon one, right? And that's even cheaper because you compost so much. And then you get to more of the differentiated, like really, how much trash are you creating every week? So anyway, sorry, continue.
Sorry. So, so then I have, I guess, I don't know. I have some comments on composting. Maybe they're more of comments than questions. I guess I have a question on, given the 6-month sort of lag and what I anticipate maybe some questions about like the uptake of the composting program because of the decision to go with the 35-gallon cart. Would we give any consideration to giving more time to have the composting conversation and implementing the composting piece of this next year? Because 6 months of it is already like accounted for, so to speak. And if everyone wanted a composting cart and they won't, like they have no way to get it. So you're kind of cost shifting, even though the program participants can't fully participate in the program this year. And I do think that like it's worth a conversation. Like we compost, right? So I have no issue with the move to try to get people to compost, but like we live in a townhouse, and like I know other people wrote in or commented at the meetings about this, like, you don't have a lot of like space in front of the yard, right? So you have like 6 driveways in the equivalent of what is some other person's entire front yard. And so you now have like 18 bins there instead of like the 3 bins that is on some other, property the same size. And so I think the like number of bins, and then you don't have like the storage capacity. And then beyond that, whether like a compost bin should really be 35 gallons, and as people have said, like the ick factor associated with that versus something that's like 12 gallons instead, that may actually allow some people to participate in the program, especially once they decide, hey, I'm gonna like move from 2 65-gallon bins to 2 35-gallon bins, and then I can actually have my composting bin too. But the way we've set it up, it's like you can't change your bin size, and you have to have a 35-gallon cart. And so I'm worried a little bit about like the implementation, the cost shifting this year, and like the attractiveness of the program overall, because I don't think it's as attractive as it could be if we had a little bit more lead time for like the implementation of it. So, I mean, there's a comment, but was there, I'll make it a question. Was there consideration to trying to make the compost bin less than 35 gallons? And I know what happened was that like the yard waste and the compost got put together, and so the yard waste
That's how
kind
it's
of made the
cost-effective,
bin,
right?
bin bigger or whatever. But that's why it also like makes a different, in my mind, I think like the HOAs are kind of different, or like, I don't, like right now, if you try to drive through Winter Hill on a Wednesday, it's like impossible because the bins are everywhere. And then the idea, or drive down Great Falls where Trammell's Gate is, or you drive down like parts of West Columbia, and like the bins are already everywhere. And so the idea of like adding a third bin, or HOA communities who don't really produce yard waste, like I think there needs to be a little bit more like
Couldn't
that
those communities,
gradation
like, 'cause I think one
factor.
idea we talked about is like, couldn't like Winter Hill share, like clusters share composting bins, right? You may not have that much yard waste because you probably have a lawn service that takes care of that HOA community, so you could probably share a compost bin for clusters of townhomes, likewise for other townhomes elsewhere.
Oh, yeah, no, and I think that makes sense. Or like, should we have something like an Arlington model where like there's an on-street composting bin, X number of places throughout the city? But like, to me, if you're like, yeah, so-and-so community, and like a lot of the townhouse communities are frankly close enough to the city composting facility that you see everyone walking over there all the time. But like, if we already know that it makes sense for some communities to share sort of composting, then I don't know why, like, at the outset, we're including composting as like a third fee in the charge, instead of trying to like better capture that over the course of the coming year to implement it kind of properly for various communities.
Because you're getting as a service, just like people in Falls Chase that might share a bin, they're getting a trash service even if you share a bin with your neighbor, right? So if you're getting composting, you just happen to share it with your neighbor, you're still getting the service of composting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess neighbors can figure out, like, Venmo me X amount. Like, it's just a little different when it's like hitting everyone's bill, is like what I'm saying, as opposed to.
Everybody would pay for it. You don't get to opt out of composting.
You don't get to opt out, right?
It's like recycling. Everyone pays for recycling even.
You might opt out of having the bin, but you still have to pay
Yeah, but that's what I'm
for
saying.
it.
I mean, it's a bit of a farce to like, to transfer all of the costs over and say like, we only anticipate, 20 or 25% of the people to continue participating. Sorry, because the program has been like developed in a way that no one's actually, or like a large percentage of people aren't actually gonna want the cart, or it's not feasible to have the cart.
Well, so we did talk with other jurisdictions that have rolled out this program, and I think generally the feedback was it's been very well received. I don't know whether Herb or Mary Catherine wants to jump in.
I think some positive differences in our community compared to some of the other ones and when they've rolled out. So one of them is that the other jurisdictions we talked to didn't partner with their school systems. So one of the easiest ways to get homes to actually start doing a new behavior is through the education in kids. We have a high percentage of parents in this community that were raised during the time in which they were inculcated into the recycling generation. So we actually have a great opportunity where the parents would pick it up, the kids would pick it up, and it would be easily understood and brought on board. So those millennial parents and those lower Gen X parents are actually an asset that some of the other communities didn't have because they rolled these out 10 years ago where that sort of memory wasn't there as part of it. Another one that we have that is a benefit here is we already do have the composting crew, right? So we already have a group of residents who have been participating as part of that. And that is something that a lot of other communities we looked at didn't have already as part of their plans. So I think we have both of those benefits of timing, and then also that we already have a group of people who have committed to composting.
Okay, other questions?
What, I also watched all of the task force meetings, and I really appreciate the questions that task force members asked and how you really tackled the situation. So I thought that was very good. In one of those meetings, the compost crew was described as a butler service almost, where they're providing bags and the bin, the little bin, and you get email messages on a regular basis about when it's coming, and this service would not be that. This would just be a standard service. So I think that's a good differentiation or a way to think about it too for the people who do get the compost crew, that it's not going to be exactly the same, similar but not exactly the same.
Christine?
I did have a few feasibility questions, but maybe some of these are details that we figure out later. Maybe this question is for Herb. If we did have this situation where we are, some people are requesting different size bins, they have a 65-gallon bin and they want a 35-gallon bin, does that turn into a logistical nightmare in terms of picking up bins? Like, would we then throw away bins, or would we reuse bins? How would that setup work?
So we actually talked about this, and I have experience from previous municipalities in doing this. And we would absorb this in DPW operations as far as picking bins up, and we would set the parameters of how we did it, whether it would be on a weekly or monthly or whatever interval that we picked, right? And so we would go pick them up, recatalog them, because every bin has a number, so it coincides with your address. We would recatalog them, store them at the property yard, and then we could redistribute them if someone changed their mind and wanted a bigger bin or a smaller bin.
Okay.
So we'd be able to handle that logistically.
Okay, so there would be some sort of storage, and we would be able to reuse bins, and so it's not like we're sending the bins to the landfill themselves.
Correct.
And also bins like break, like ours, our wheel broke like a couple, months ago, and so they brought a new one, so.
Correct.
Okay,
They could be
so there's already, okay. Other things, actually, I was just curious, in terms of the compost bin, would that be something that people could put their leaves in? And so if I guess rather than leaving them out on the streets, that could also potentially reduce our leaf pickup vacuum expenses. Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely not a one-for-one though, like one bin each week won't.
It won't necessarily, yeah, no, I realize that
Take
some people are
everything
gonna
off.
have like way more leaves than fit in the bin, but it just, something else that came to mind. And then, yeah, actually, that's all my questions. I have comments left, so thank you.
Other questions? Could we go to page 23 that shows that? Oh, Dave, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, Mayor, thanks. How soon will people have the option to get the 35-gallon bin as opposed to 65-gallon? And I'm really concerned about showing different costs, but if you really can't get the benefit of the cost savings, we ought to be pretty careful about how we're explaining that. Because a lot of people may want to go with the 35, and you're saying if they currently get a 65, that it will be 6 months before they can get the cost savings of the 35 bin?
Yeah, that's what we're proposing, is it would be next year when that.
I'd like to challenge you on that, and hope that if we're going to give people this sliding scale of cost, that you actually enable people to take advantage of that. That's also consistent with moving forward more rapidly on the pay-as-you-throw approach. So that would be a major point. I guess the other general point I have is that as I continue to look at this, even as we deal with one set of inequities, that we don't create others. And so I'll be studying this very closely to make sure that we're not doing that. That's just a general comment, but I want to go back to, if we're going to put out literature that says, oh yeah, your cost is X with 65, but you can lower it to 35, and we say to people, oh no, you can't do that for 6 months. I don't think that'll play very well with people, particularly people who want to save and people who want to move to the pay-as-you-throw. One final question: are we also encouraging multifamily buildings to also engage in a pay-as-you-throw and composting approach? Because we've decided that's a citywide policy. So what are we doing to urge that? Finally, one other question which we may get from single-family homeowners. I'm just saying it's a question, but I want to say, what do I say to someone who says, I'm paying the highest tax rates in the Commonwealth. As a single-family homeowner, I'm paying the highest amount of taxes. And it looks like to me that I'm paying the same amount, or I may be paying a little amount, but for the same services, I'm actually paying more. So what do you say to folks who ask that question? And again, I'm just putting it out there for further study, but those are some of the questions that I have. Consider them just questions at this point. Thank you.
Sure, and one thing, so for the council, I will follow up with staff, just, it would be great if we could have that choice of the 35 versus 65 this year. There's going to have to be some kind of a window by which that decision is made. I know from the treasurer's perspective, they need to know as soon as possible to run their bills. But we'll press on that, and maybe we'll have some more information for the council on that question next week.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you very much for that.
Was that it for questions, Dave?
Yeah, I think that's it. I asked a couple other questions I can get, responses to down the road, but very, very complex, interesting set of trade-offs here. And I want to keep studying it to make sure that we're being as fair to our entire population as possible. So thank you.
On the tax rate point, though, because we have lowered the tax rate 15 cents over the past 4 years, I just pulled up the budget chart. We actually have 4 jurisdictions that are actually at rates higher than ours. Vienna, Herndon, City of Manassas, and somebody else on this chart. So I did have some questions. If we can go to page 23, also on the benchmarking. I think that's, my computer died, but I think that's the slide that has the benchmarking of the fees charged by other jurisdictions.
Yes,
Yes. I don't know if we can pull that up on the screen.
Sure.
So our 355 and 390 was quite competitive compared to that. And usually the concern is when you're small, you don't have as much scale. So do we just have a really great contract with ADS, or is it that other jurisdictions throw in other things into their fee that we did not consider, or both?
So we haven't done a full breakout of how they set up their fees. I'm guessing it is the latter.
Because they include LEAF, for example.
That's right.
In most of them. And so I didn't know whether that was the explanation why their costs were much higher. I mean, significantly in some cases, like 500 in the City of Alexandria. Herb, I don't know whether you have any insight for 752 for Fairfax County. Like, that's double.
I know that some do include leaf collection, and we discussed that as a group, and our sense was, just like cleaning the streets, cleaning the gutters of leaves is an important thing the city needs to do to keep it, my wife says, you're dabbling in solid waste, but your true passion is stormwater. It's keeping the stormwater system running is a community concern. So we recommended that it not be included in here, which is one reason that this number is lower than in some other jurisdictions. It's not the only reason. This is pretty complicated. It's more complicated than one thinks once one delves into it. And I don't think we have all of the component costs, but that's one of the key issues.
Okay. I guess one request I would have is, as we develop the FAQs, it would be helpful to explain the cost difference, not necessarily with jurisdictions, but between the 35 and the 65 gallon, why it's right now only a $35 difference. Because when you actually look at the cost, like the tipping fee itself is actually a small proportion of it. The labor of actually coming to your house, whether you have a ton of trash versus a little trash, doesn't actually matter that much. And so I think explaining that why there's not a bigger difference is important for people. So that's one request.
Just one thing I would say there, because we talked about that, and one of the concerns, I have is that people sometimes perform to the metrics, and they will get a 35 gallon, but then they'll throw 7 trash bags out, right? And we really want the bags in the containers where they create less disturbance, fewer pests, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't want to create such a big difference that people try to game the system and actually end up with a less clean way of disposing their trash than they do now. So that's why we as a group kind of came back to, let's keep this differential small or smaller and get some experience rather than make it wide and not know what's going to happen next. Because I think there is a big risk that something dramatic could happen and it might not be in the community's interest.
On that note, is there anyone else in the region other than Charlottesville that has kind of a multiple tier fee? Or would we be the first in Nova to know how it goes?
I don't know the answer to that question.
But it would be helpful to know, like, do people game it? Like, what implementation concerns there are, the switching of bins to go from a 65 to
I haven't seen
35?
anything like this. We did see Prince William charges different fees for different types of units for townhouses versus single-family homes versus condominiums. We did see for leaf collection, there was some charge based on assessed value. There are some things other than just, everybody pays the same fee. But in terms of different size units, I can't really respond to
Yeah,
that.
flat fee seems to be predominant in Nova, and, one fee, regardless of how much you throw. So I'm just curious whether anyone else had moved to kind of a small bin, big bin fee, like the 2-tier. And on that point about kind of cost transparency, I think somebody brought this up before, the yellow stickers being at $1, does that really cover our costs?
I brought that up I brought it up at one of the task force, and thank you. I was remiss in not thanking you and your colleagues for being on this task force. I did attend a couple of those meetings, and as a family of 6, we do generate more trash sometimes than will fit in the big gray bin. We do a lot of entertaining, and my point was that, we can put out a contractor bag full of, stuff, just with $1 trash tag, which seems like we could be charging more than that because, it's really, you could put out several of those and really it's like it could be bulk collection for $3, And so my thought was maybe it doesn't have to be part of this, but my thought is, maybe we move to something like someone said about if it's a typical kitchen trash bag that's 13 gallons, that's $1. But if it's a contractor bag, it's $5 or something. Not this go around, but I do think it's worth a discussion down the road.
Just looking at the Charlottesville stickers, again, I just want to make sure our costs are transparent, right? Like whatever it costs in terms of labor and the tipping fees for that size of whatever we're throwing with the sticker should be fairly paid for by people. And if we want to encourage behavior to not have too many overages other than the Downs parties, then we should charge appropriately. So I just want to make sure that we extend that same line of thinking to these stickers. I understand that people really like their $1 stickers, but I just want to
I came up with the ESC too. We talked about stickers and sticker prices and covering costs too, so
Okay.
I'm +1 on a future discussion of.
Do we have a goal for, if we do move to compost, what would our target or goal, like diversion percentage would be? Like, do we have a target of like, here's how many people we expect will start moving into compost, here's how much we'll reduce in terms of our waste, and then we can at least measure whether this is accomplishing that kind of climate outcome that we want?
I know that analysis is underway. We didn't have it for tonight's report. We'll try to get that for council as you're deliberating this as it goes forward.
I think in the vein of obviously like trying to solve fairness, I think the other thing we're trying to solve is the climate issue, right? And trying to solve our energy, or solid waste, or climate energy action plan. So it'd be nice to have some metrics of what we think we are aspiring to and then hold ourselves to that. And then we can, just like other things, when we adopt policies, we can tweak it to see how we can actually get to those outcomes and results and hold ourselves accountable to that. And then the last one is, I think, a question I asked before. So for people that don't escrow their taxes. They get a tax bill twice a year. Do we know what percentage of people do escrow their taxes and don't actually get this tax bill?
So I asked the treasurer that question, and we'll get that to council. I've heard that number before, but I don't know what it is right now.
As we think about like communications, right? So people will get a lot of communications about this, but they may never see a real estate tax bill if they escrow, right? I don't know.
Yes.
You get a
You
real
get a-
estate assessment, but then you
You get an
don't
assessment and it says, don't pay this bill, but you get the whole thing on there and it
just
says.
divide it up over your mortgage payment.
Yeah, no, yes. Yeah,
I don't escrow, so I don't know.
yeah,
Pay my
you
bill.
get, twice a year I get a statement.
Just
That-
like you would if you're paying the bill, you just don't pay the bill.
Right.
To the escrow company. So you still
Right.
see everything you're
But
paying.
you don't actually pay them out.
Right.
It's part of, yes,
Right, right.
that'd be helpful to know.
So I mean, everybody sees it. I don't know what. Sorry. Everybody gets the statement of what they're paying. So presumably this is going to be another line on that statement that says your fee is this. And it looks just like you would, if you didn't escrow, you get the actual bill. This one says this is not a bill, but it shows you all the same details of what you're paying in taxes. Your, you know, your assessment, the tax rate, the math there, and so I don't think that that's necessarily a communications issue. It's, you still see the same thing.
And then the last question, which was in the Q&A or the public comment, is do we expect people to get their compost back or access the compost in any way? That was one of the public comments we received.
Yeah, and that was a feature of Compost Crew. And I don't know, Herb, do you know the answer to that? Does Convert Us or ADS have a program like that where you?
So we're exploring it right now. The logistical part is hard for them because it's so much bigger than Compost Crew, who is sort of a smaller entity, and trying to get what that would look like and how that would look. We're looking at it. We're not necessarily sure it's feasible right now, but it's definitely on the table.
I just have a thought on that one, because I do use Compost Crew and I do get a little 1 cubic foot bag that I could also have bought at Brown's Hardware. So it's not like they're actually giving me back the compost. The compost that I gave, I'm getting leaf compost, right, exactly. I'm getting a bag, a very small bag of compost once a year, if I remember to order it. If I don't remember to order it, then I miss it that year. So that might make it easier. It's a whole different program altogether.
And actually, I lied, I had one more question. So in the, during budget season, we talked about holding the schools harmless. Assume that's still in place here, so that the $1 million now cost is a decrease in $1 million in revenue, but we would not decrease their share of it, so they would not decrease $500,000.
That's right. So once we really kind of looked into it, there isn't any action needed because the school budget's already adopted this year. So if this were being considered last spring in terms of their budget, it would have been an impact, but it's not. They've already got their budget. And then next year, the way the revenue sharing works, it's a split, a 50-50 split of the growth of revenue. And the growth of revenue is going to be the same with this change or without this change. And so there is no impact for the schools. We will sit down and walk them through that, and if they have any questions about it, we'll make sure that everybody's on solid ground on this. But that's our analysis of the situation.
Solid waste.
The principle is, this is a policy decision relating to solid waste. It should have no bearing whatsoever on the school revenue sharing agreement. That's the mindset that we have, and we think that that's the way it's going to be.
Although we are reducing revenue, the pie of revenue is going to be 1.5 or 1.8 cents less.
But what's split
fee count toward-
is the growth, and so maybe we can work it through with the at the Budget and Finance Committee where you have schools and us together and just
Yeah.
go through it together. But it does work out.
Okay, yeah.
I had to scratch my head over it for like
Yeah.
3 months before I understood it. So
Right.
I'm just respectful of, why there are questions, but they can be
Right. We
resolved.
need a pie chart and some different
Yeah,
things.
right.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, that's it for questions. We have comments about the overall proposal from the task force and staff? Oh, okay.
In terms of timing each year, so this is a fee-based collection service, right? And so we don't have required users. It's if you use the service, you are required to pay the fee. Most single-family, like detached, will generally end up being a required user. But if there were a community or HOA or something like that decided, we've gone and we've checked, part of our community gets contracted service, and so we want to wrap in the other part of the community with the contracted service and not do this through the city because we did, that we examined it and we think the fees will be better, or we like the model better. We're just going to use a, shared bin instead of having all this individual everything everywhere for our community. That community, communities, let's say, communities like that decided what they wanted to do, or they decided they want to go in with the Park Towers contract as their, a condo building like Falls Chase might decide they want to do that. Is it like on a yearly basis, someone would have the opportunity to alert the city and say, we no longer want to be part of city-based fee service. We are showing you proof of a contract, and so please just remove us from the bill so we no longer have the line item?
Yeah, I think that would be feasible. I think we'd have an open season, and we would work with HOAs during that open season period.
Comments? Laura?
Yeah, well, I just a couple. I do like the two-tier system. I think that, to me, makes the most sense. One thing from Mayor Catherine, with the communications piece, I know that often we get an actual flyer that's on the actual trash can. I don't know if the trash company does that, but is that something we're thinking about doing at some point?
Yeah, Lonnie is planning that in.
Okay.
That does come at a cost, so we wouldn't be able to do it every week.
Right.
But it would be part of the overall comms plan. That's what we're hoping for.
Okay, great, thank you. I didn't see it in that, so that I just wasn't sure. We might want to add that in to the slide. Let's see, and then let's see. And again, I think looking at the fees that were proposed and looking as the mayor said, we look very competitive. Our rates. I think Arlington just agreed to $415 per year, or $416. That was just in Arlington now recently. So our rates seem right there and better. Let's see. We it's interesting. I think and Ms. Flynn was talking about it is a very complicated topic. It was interesting at the task force meeting, one of the public speakers came up, and his complaint was he has a family such as mine that's a family of 6, and he complained that there's no that he has to pay for the stickers, because his thought is, hey, if I have a family of 6, I should be given a little bit of leeway because, of course, we're going to generate more trash. So I think it's interesting that you can really look at it from, that's just to throw that out there, all perspectives. I think it's important to remind people about the code, that the code does support a fee structure. I think I heard from the similar resident that Ms. Connolly did about that slippery slope. And in my conversation with him, he talked about, he has, I think, a house at higher assessed value, so he pays more taxes, but he doesn't get more services. So he's looking at this as sort of a piecemeal thing. And I had to explain to him, but also if you look at that chart, by the time you get your tax reduction, you're also going to be paying less than some of our less valued houses. So I think this is complicated, and you can look at it from all different perspectives. But I think going with that varied, the two tiers makes the most sense. And I guess just my last comment would be, somewhere in this document, we talked about the tax relief. And right now, I think we only look at it if it's a senior or someone with a disability. And I would like to, at the future, talk about just straight salary. So not, if someone's got a lower salary, but they're not a senior citizen or they're not disabled, I'd still like to consider them for some tax relief for the solid waste fee. That's it for me. But thank you again to the task force. And again, I do, it is, that, I think we're going to have more discussions. But the task force, I really think that was a great idea. And it's interesting, even the letters we've gotten, that not everyone may agree, but they all agreed that the task force idea was a great concept to have. So I thank you, Mr. Shields, for getting that all set up. And I think it's a great model for us as a council to think about in the future, having task force where there's community input and staff, public meetings where people can come and make comment and watch the work being done. So I think that's been a really terrific model. And so I'm very, very happy with that. And, again, I don't think there's a perfect solution, but to me, this does seem to be the fairest solution. When I think about condominiums who they can't access trash service, but then they also have to pay for trash. So basically they're paying twice for trash. And I kind of in my mind think, well, it's sort of like saying, okay, well, you can't access the public school system, but if you want to send your kid to school, you also then have to pay for a private school. So it's, I think that it is not fair for some of these condominiums to be having to pay twice for trash collection. So, again, I don't think there's a perfect solution, but this seems to me, as of this conversation, I'm sure we'll be talking more. It does seem that two-tier approaches makes the most sense. Thank you.
Other comments? Christine?
I just wanted to second what Laura said regarding the relief. I'm very much in favor of the senior relief, but I would like us to eventually move to something where it's if someone's cost burdened. I would also, I appreciate what Fred said about not wanting to have much of a difference between 35 and the 65 bin to start out. But I think eventually, if all goes well, it would be nice to move to an incentive system where we could maybe offset some of the cost of those smaller bins. What else? Oh, it's just funny regarding the ick factor. In Seattle, there's been a third bin for 3 decades now. I can't tell you why. The third bin is not gross for any reason. We put the compost in there, we put the yard clippings in, but I don't know, it never turned icky. So, and we've been using the same bin for at least the past decades.
I will say I was in 4 different cities last week that all actually had third bins. I peeked in them, took pictures of them. I didn't show you guys the photos of those. They were fine.
They were fine. Okay, that's good to know. It's funny though, because my small compost crew bin is a little bit gross though. So, but the big one in Seattle is totally fine. I also just wanted to say this communication stuff is awesome. I love this little question sheet. I think it makes it really easy. I love the ideas of adding more of these Q&A things to this. But I think this is just such a great way to, I guess, get people familiar with it. So yes, I'm very, very pleased with this so far. And I might have other things, but I'm excited that we can move forward into this and actually just sort of get things done in a that are meaningful and do them somewhat quickly, rather than, especially given that this has been going on since 2003, or I guess you have, I don't know, maybe it was in Park Towers, somebody was coming here since the 1980s or whatever else. So anyway, I'm glad to see this moving forward. Oh, the last thing I will say, and this is to Laura's point, if somebody is living in a single family home, and so they don't feel like, they feel like they're paying the most in the city, and they're not getting more services, but in some ways, every single road, and the city has to pay for road maintenance to every single additional house. The city has, and that's expensive, as is every mile of pipes and all the utilities and everything that goes to additional houses. So anyway, I just hope they don't feel like they're getting gypped by, or maybe that's not the right word. I hope that they don't feel like they're getting a run over on them for paying higher taxes. They are getting additional services from the city in terms of utilities and roads and other things like that.
Other comments?
I would like to thank the task force and the staff for the amount of work they put into this. We all had a lot of questions, and they're all tons and tons of rabbit holes you could go down. And as you know, as the committee talked about it, there were definitely, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I think the staff did a really nice job of focusing and bringing everyone together to understand things. There were still a ton of rabbit holes, and I feel like those are the things that could trip us up with communications, because once everyone sees this, they'll have a lot of questions. Did they cover this? Did they think about this? And the answer is yes, they thought about almost all of it. But if you're just coming in right now to this conversation, you're gonna, well, what about this? They didn't think about my situation, or what about my neighbor's situation? So I do feel like that's one of those that could trip us up, and I'm confident that Mary Catherine's team will make sure that all those things are covered. But that what about this part is tricky, because you saw it even when I watched the first meeting of the task force. They were asking all the same questions that we had asked 2 months before, that we sort of had answers to about why we couldn't service the condominiums. But the next group of people have those questions, and someone else is going to have that question too. So you might want to include that in there, actually. Those kind of questions. Well, why can't we do it this way? So because we have an informed populace, those questions will keep coming up. And one question about the people with 550 assessed value, 550K assessed value. Almost all of those people are condo owners. So you could almost take that off the chart, because those people are having a net zero increase. Their taxes are going to go down. They're not going to pay any fees at all. I can't think of a single.
There
Yeah.
are, the condos at Winter Hill are a big sort of slice of.
But I don't think they're covered by our trash. I think they have their own.
Yeah, they are.
The Winter Hill condos, as opposed to the townhouses.
So, yeah.
Okay,
Both are covered.
So, but it's a very, very small slice of people
That's true.
who have a home that is valued at $550,000 that will actually see an increase in their taxes. That's all. Thank you.
Actually, for some reason, Winter Hill assessments were pretty flat this past year. Went around, they did not see the similar AV increase that we all did, so they actually don't see much of an impact in their tax bill, and they still might come out flat. Other comments? Debbie?
I just also want to thank, to be redundant, to thank the task force and to thank staff for digging through all of this. I also just wanted to reiterate the ESC's excitement about moving forward with composting and starting to take action on our community energy action plan. And this is one step in that direction. I look forward to seeing, what staff comes back with, how soon we can implement it, to your point about timing of it and what fees you're paying and how much services you're getting for that. Like, is it we come back and we charge half of that because you're only receiving half of a composting year? So whatever staff comes back, I'll look forward to seeing that. But I just wanted to highlight that the ESC is very much in favor of moving forward with composting as soon as possible. Thanks.
I'll make final comments. I won't reiterate my other comments, but also thanks to the task force. I know Fred, for multiple years now, has been honing his own communication, messaging, and everything else, and I think it helps, that whole process in helping people understand sort of things that are in play. So thank you again. I think I started wanting, and maybe it would have been simpler to approach this from like a tax credit payment in lieu of service, and it may have been more targeted to kind of the initial issue, but we couldn't do it that way. And so, I do support a fee for service model. I think we've been talking a lot about the residential side of this, and I think as we've acknowledged, right, among council, there is a bit of a windfall on the commercial, like solely commercial piece of this, because there is a decrease in the tax rate, I know we talk about as being sort of revenue neutral overall, but we, often do sort of say to residential taxpayers, we expand a lot of the commercial and move to drive kind of commercial development in the city to help reduce some of those residential costs that still do, account for like the larger pieces of the general fund. And so I would like to kind of think about, what are other ways, or kind of how do we use the tax structure in a way to continue to look at sort of what those tax burdens are, and sort of whether C&I tax is a way to potentially like recalibrate some of that, given that our neighboring jurisdictions do have lower tax rates overall, but then have their like 12.5-cent C&I tax in places that like do have higher transportation costs now because of some of the transportation costs associated with, development or increased sort of use of transportation modes in different places. And so I would like us to kind of keep that in play as we go forward, and kind of continue to tweak this in ways that seem, to address all of these different issues.
Can I
yeah,
jump in
yeah.
on that comment? Because Wyatt and I had this conversation earlier today about, it's net neutral this year, but what about the future tax rates and the burden on, to your point? So my recommendation at our next meeting was going to also ask the staff to look at that for fiscal year '27, whether, C&I tax that we've discussed numerous times along the way is an appropriate way of bringing back the tax rate on the commercial side. So I just wanted to second what you're already saying.
Great, thank you. And then, I've been on the tax relief part of it, like the income-based tax relief. I understand for implementation reasons, sort of, doing the senior tax model. I would like us to move to a true sort of income-based tax relief model, where we have the authority to do so. And, to the extent that we're in a particularly sort of like difficult year, I would even sort of think about, emergency assistance funds as being an appropriate use, to the extent that like people who otherwise don't get income tax relief because their ages aren't high enough could sort of get some relief from this fee, or sort of increased fees this year in particular, if it takes us 12 more months to sort of work out this model a little bit more. But that's all. Thank you.
Dave, you had your hand up earlier.
Thanks to all of our citizens, especially those who served on the task force. A lot of work went into this. And I've asked some questions previously tonight. And one other one, in terms of a model going forward, when we set up a task force like this, I think we should be careful about not limiting options for the task force to consider. I think that was done in this case. I do recall that the city manager said they didn't want to do it. I've not seen evidence that the city actually explored options before they limited the options, and I'd like to see that evidence. But I raised just a couple questions and concerns, and I'm still studying this very carefully. I want to make sure we're maximally fair to the maximum number of our citizens, regardless of where they live or what their circumstances are. So thanks again to the members of the task force especially, and to all the citizens who have inputted into the process and will input in our process. Thank you.
Everyone's gone. Yeah, so I'll just reiterate thanks to the task force for this. I will be honest that I was not convinced on the two-tier fee because I was worried about implementation, but it sounds like we're starting to think through most of the implementation concerns, and so I do think that is a good way to be greener and try to incent the right behaviors. And so if staff can pull it off and the treasurer says they can bill appropriately, I would love to see us move closer to pay-as-you-throw and get people throwing less trash away. I don't love the timing, so the fact that people can't move to the 35 one sooner while paying the new fee, and so if staff is following up on that, I think that would be an important
Yeah.
thing to address if possible. And then while we are in the mindset of as compost, if we do implement this year, given that multifamily is half of our housing stock now, I would love for us to think about composting in commercial and multifamily. Like if we really are serious about our climate goals, like that really needs to extend beyond where we do curbside. So maybe a council priorities discussion for 2026. That's it. Thank you again.
I appreciate council listening to us today, and also Andy, and you did a fabulous job. There were parameters that we operated to David's point, to not come up with new policies and new approaches and try to work within a given structure. But given that, Andy did a great job of soliciting everyone's views, trying to get everyone's 2 cents ideas. I think everybody on the task force worked together in a collaborative way, and even though we came in with different attitudes and opinions, I think all of us walked out feeling the engagement very clear and open process. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I did attend a couple of those meetings, as I know some of you all did, and I felt like y'all really, I think he did a great job, and you all felt like you could throw anything out there. So, yeah, thank you. And I'll just say, Mayor Hardy, also with the differentiation of those two trash, the smaller and the bigger, to me, it's not just about trying to encourage people to generate less trash. For me, it's also the townhouses that have maybe 1 or 2 residents. They don't generate as much trash, so they could use a smaller one, and that'll bring down the cost for them too. So that's why I like that too. Is not just the encouraging people to generate less trash, but it would be more economical for those smaller, assessed value houses. So, thank you. Thanks again.
Okay. I think we have a couple of consent items left. Nutrient credits and Greenway Downs, traffic calming, construction starting.
So, thank you, Herb.
Thank you.
So the 2 items on consent, so first, the purchase of nutrient credits. So the staff report does lay out the rationale for this. I know the council in the past has discussed the preferred strategy always is to do the actions within the city limits to capture the phosphorus, the nitrogen, that are the key indicators that DEQ regulates. And we do as much of that as we can. But in order to comply with DEQ's total maximum daily load requirements, we do need to purchase some of these nutrient credits that are in watersheds throughout the Commonwealth that go into the Chesapeake Bay. And so that's that item. Be happy to answer any, or try to answer any questions on that. And then the Greenway Downs construction, we're very pleased to be moving forward with that. Just to remind our council, this is a neighborhood traffic calming program. We've had, the whole neighborhood engagement process, and it's a unique one in which we try to get sort of the whole sort of vehicle network that ties into North Washington Street and have a systemic look at it. And this is entirely paid for with grant funds through the Department of Transportation. Be happy to answer any questions on that one as well.
Questions, I think? I think we said the timing of the Greenway Downs would be after school starts.
Yeah, unfortunately.
How long will it take?
I don't have the full detail on the construction. We can get that information out there.
Staff report, it was like 3
Yeah.
months, 6 months. It
And
was rolled down, I thought I had
It's
it.
a big number. I think that I can give you a more nuanced number of when we're in our
Right.
pre-construction conference with them, what is it really going to take?
6 months beginning fall 25 is what's.
Yeah,
on
so
line 42 right now.
contractually is one thing, but we really don't want them in the neighborhood. We want them in and out as quickly as possible.
Dave?
Yeah, Wyatt, on the nutrient credits purchase, we need that because that's a significant amount of money. I think we ought to spend some time making sure that people understand the regulatory requirements, that they're not going to change, and that this is something we absolutely have no choice over. because that's what, a couple cents on the tax rate? And that's per fiscal year. So does that mean that in future fiscal years, we're going to have to be spending $640,000 a year to meet this requirement?
No, this is a one-time purchase. Now, we may in the future, but to meet the DEQ's current TMDL, this will take care of us for a long chunk of time. And half of that 640 is paid for actually by DEQ, so it's a 50-50 cost share. Having said all that, it is a lot of money, and so our preference would be to, through regulating construction activity and through other best management practices, try to capture this phosphorus in other ways. But if we do it that way, it's expensive as well. So there is no kind of free way to do it. I think this is, in fact, probably other than the regulatory arm, if we're doing capital projects, it would be more expensive to capture it here. And so this is a cheaper cost, a more efficient way to do it.
And when there are developments like residential development, the owner has to pay
That's right.
that as well. So it's
So
in
it's not
addition-
free.
it's not
Someone's
free.
paying it. That's
Yeah.
right.
So is this calibrated based upon the size of the development?
Well, it's calibrated.
In other words, it's one thing to do a single-family house, it's another thing to do 8 stories of apartments or condominiums or whatever in a mixed-use building.
Well, that's right. And so most of our capture of these nutrients actually has been in the large projects. And so we can break out those numbers for council. And I think we did when we updated the code. We sort of told that story of where the pounds of nitrogen and phosphorus that we've been able to keep out of the Chesapeake Bay, where it's mostly come from, and it's mostly been from the large projects. But every household, every single-family house that's being torn down and replaced, they play their part as well. It's just
Right.
those numbers take a long time to add up.
Right, just because the numbers are so large, I think a little bit of laying the foundation here might be useful. Thank you.
I had a question along these lines too. I mean, it says $640,000 per fiscal year. I thought I had remembered from the CIP that we were, over the course of like 5 years, or maybe less, paying something like $2 million in nutrient credit fees. So I do think like the costs are significant costs in terms of annual costs over each year. And so it does get back to that question of like, apart from paying for the nutrient credits, what can we be doing? And, can we please look at the stormwater fee credit system again and sort of things, you say like, could the city help residential properties with on-site sort of reductions? And I just don't have enough of a sense of like what those numbers look like. But in terms of this like consent item, it seems fine.
And I will get back with council on the recurring costs. My understanding is this is a one-time charge, and if I've misspoken, I will
It says
make sure that it's correct.
$640,000 per fiscal year on line 3.
Okay.
And so I think I think in our, because I remember seeing this and maybe asking about it at the CIP stage, like I think it came out to something like $2 million in nutrient credits in the budget book. But regardless, my other question was sort of on the 2023, when lines 31 and 32 talk about the loads, 1,300 plus pounds of nitrogen and 174 pounds of phosphorus. Like, are those what they say we need to reduce in 5 years? Like, is this, the 2023 permit runs through 2028, so that's the 5-year reduction that they allocate to us?
That's right.
And is there any, because the numbers are so low in terms of what we can accomplish, even though we've had sort of significant development and likely more development in these past few years than we are going to have, and we're still only at 18 pounds of phosphorus and 57 pounds of nitrogen. We're like way far away, right, from 1,300 pounds if you're only doing 57 pounds a year. It doesn't, like, is it worthwhile to get a better sense of how they're actually allocating this responsibility to us and whether it's like disproportionate or like unattainable? Because then it doesn't seem like you should really be having to pay for the amount of credits for something that it's like impossible for you to attain. And so it just seems like worth an inquiry in my mind.
So we can get more background on it. I'll just make a comment that when a lot of this were done, I think that as someone who represents an urban area, I think there was a big cost transfer from rural areas to urban areas. And the amount of money that urban areas pay per pound of phosphorus is really high compared to taking out of the agricultural sector. But that's the way it worked politically, and we now sort of see these costs. That's a commentary, but let me put some numbers behind that.
But
Could be a
I think the
legislative
context is,
action,
yeah,
too,
it's important for legislative
future
committee. Yeah.
Legislative committee to say this is unattainable, unfair, and disproportionate costs.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, like, the context is helpful, because then in ledge committee, we can figure out, like, absorbing
what
other
it should be.
costs right now too, like, yeah.
So I will, Cindy just pointed out to me, so it is an annual cost up through 28. That's under our current MS4 permit. So I misunderstood that myself. I apologize for that. Just noting that this is a $1.5 million expenditure over the next 3 years in the CIP.
And this is all state mandated, it didn't come down from federal EPA to state to then? I'm just wondering about, not for the right reasons, but does it get rolled back at a federal level, then it gets rolled
Right.
back at our state level?
And so that was a comment earlier from Councilmember Snyder also. And so that's worthy of following up on to understand that regulatory regime. It did ultimately come from the federal, the TMDL construct came from the EPA.
Right.
And then DEQ, as well as as Pennsylvania, Maryland, are working together to meet those TMDL, all at the sort of in our own way at the state, but to meet an EPA mandate.
This is Dave, just to follow up. I'm not challenging the environmental benefits, but what I am suggesting, and I think the discussion is helpful, is just, Wyatt, if you could, just more of a background on how we got to where we are here, and do we have any options going forward to reduce the obligations on the part of the city without negatively affecting the environment? I think that's the fundamental question. Thanks.
And not to go too deep into it, but it is the fundamental question too, if you can't reduce it in we're buying credits, right? So there's a whole lot, substack about the concept of credits, and does it really impact the environment the way you want it to? Like, how good are the credits? Are they actually reducing the phosphorus in another area that then makes some, because we're not reducing them here. It's not impacting the Chesapeake Bay. You're offsetting it by buying something in another region altogether. So there's an extensive debate about the efficacy of nutrient credits in the first place. So we could spend a couple semesters talking about that.
So one thing on we might not be ready for schedule, but there's one thing I wanted to put out for consideration of council on schedule.
I just had a question on the traffic calming project, and maybe this is something for another time. I am just curious, like, have we worked with that contractor before? And like, I know that we had problems with previous contractors on other projects around the city. Like, when we have a problem with a contractor, do we write them off to not work with them again? Or what's the process like? Especially, I guess I'm concerned, like, if we're always taking the lowest bidder, and the lowest bidder is like $200,000 cheaper than the next offer, it like makes me feel nervous that we're like not getting good quality work.
I can just ask staff kind of what their view is of this contractor.
Okay. do we like,
Or-
do we generally write people
We're
off?
recommending it, I will say that.
Okay, okay, that's fine. I guess I want to make sure that, are we allowed to pick and choose which contractors we even have send in bids?
When we're doing construction bids through VDOT, they have an IFB process that we
Okay.
have to follow.
We have to
and you
follow
could-
that. And then we have to take the lowest bidder. There's no,
In an IFB process, yes.
okay,
Not in all procurements, but in an IFB, an invitation for bids, you do.
you do, okay. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
If it makes you feel better, wasn't the highest bidder the one that we just had all the problems with? So,
Well, I will say this, if we're talking about the WNOD crossings, I think the final product is great. It looks really nice. And it was a tough negotiation, so I want to credit Ryan Borgatti in particular, but staff worked really hard to produce an outcome that was fair to the city's taxpayers. VDOT put a little bit of extra into it, and then the contractor could kind of live with it. But the contractor had to make some pretty difficult things happen to do what they did after the initial concrete didn't work out. But the final result, I think, looks great. So I want to give that contractor some credit for sticking with it. And
fair enough,
finishing it
okay.
up.
As do our new stamped crosswalks at Broad and West, stamped and striped.
Yeah.
Those went in quickly.
I think people are feeling pretty good about the new council standard. I think it's working out.
And also positive feedback so far on the hawk signals, at least I've gotten.
People stop them. The only one that's tricky is on Oak. People turn right coming up
Yeah, it's a little
North
quick.
Oak, and it's really quick, and so a lot of times they don't see that it's on, and so I've seen a couple close calls.
No, South Oak, and they turn left. It's also kind of close, but.
Do we want to do schedule tonight? We have office hours on Wednesday anyway, at 9. Or do you want to save it for 8:30 on? That's the preference of the group. I know Laura's on London time.
I'm remote Wednesday, so it depends on sort of where other people will be and whether you'll have a quorum.
Let's just do it now.
Okay.
We spent a lot of time last weekend, so it shouldn't be as extensive.
We do have office hours this Wednesday, so we still need to show up if you're around.
So, do we even have it? Oh, there it is. Okay. So here's one thing for council's consideration. So we have Berman, this is next Monday, August 11th. We have Berman Park ribbon cutting at 6. As I sent out a note for the closed session discussion, one of the issues is our outside legal counsel on Pearson Square. They really would prefer to be early than late. And so we could do the ribbon cutting at 6 and start early at 7 and be firmly done at 5 till, 7:25 so that we can start the regular meeting on time. Would that suit people to have that early start? Sally, does that, we talked sort of roughly about that. I don't know if you're here and you think that will work for our outside
Yes, that
legal
would-
counsel? Okay.
Yes, that would work.
So we'd start with the closed session at the beginning as
That's
well.
right.
Works for me.
Aaron, will you be back?
All right. We'll try to get through the preliminaries as quickly as we can and get into the affordable living policy. And then we do have, there was discussion last time about flipping the agenda so some of these solid waste items could be up earlier. We wouldn't do that formally because council's rules of procedure sort of lay out how it's supposed to go, but the council could by motion ask for the public hearing on the solid waste items early. Maybe, Mayor, we could sort of talk about the logistics of that. But I don't think there's anything on here that would be a surprise for the 11th. And then looking down to September 2nd then, the Dominion franchise agreement, I think we're going to take off the agenda. Okay. So I know there's been a lot of council interest in that, but I think we
Do they
have
not want
more
to be in the hot
time
seat
that's
asking
needed.
about when the West Falls lights are on?
Regardless of whether and when the franchise agreement is in front of you, I am working closely with our new Public Works Director to make sure we have a comprehensive list and outreach for the West Falls one in particular. The project manager's working, VDOT, Fairfax County, and the development. And it is supposed to be done before school starts.
And also, did we ever resolve the WNOD lighting issue with Dominion?
It is not resolved yet, but we are having another round of design coordination within Dominion to sort out the left and the right hand to get it solved. So that's an active one I've escalated. And we're getting a full list and a comprehensive, which is both our projects, but also cleaning up some of the cables and extra poles and stuff in the city. I have an intern this summer who's helping inventory all of that for us.
Sorry, so Dominion's not on for September 2nd.
Correct.
So what we would have then is an initiating resolution for the utilities comp plan chapter, site plan and subdivision code updates, holiday calendar for the coming year, arts and humanities grants, agreement for the Aurora House on consent, opioid settlement on consent, CWG, that's computer purchases on consent, and an MOU with Mill Creek for signal installation at the same intersection we were talking about just a moment ago at Broad and West. We do have a work session on the 2nd, so if there are any solid waste follow-ups that are requested or needed, we could have a little time for that if desired. And then on the 8th, Employee of the Year recognition, Chamber portraits unveiling. Very excited about both of those.
Is Employee of the Year early? An early arrival for a
No.
reception? No? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we would have a reception for that meeting. That's right.
For the record, I'll be on electronically on the 8th. It says I'm absent, but I will be,
Okay.
I'll be calling in,
All right,
so,
we'll make that change.
for quorum purposes.
All right.
And Wyatt, I did tell Celeste, but I will be virtual on August 11th.
Okay. So then on the 8th, we'd have a second reading on all the solid waste and real estate issues we've been discussing tonight. First reading on a code change on site plan and subdivisions. The initiating resolution for the utilities and facilities comp plan amendment, and then those consent items we just listed. So that's our September cycle. For the 15th, Gordon Road ULI TAP report discussion and next steps. This contract approval process discussion, Arlington County Fire Agreement, and Fairfax County Sewer Purchase Agreement. And then we have another work session on the 6th. That will have Arlington County Public Safety and Jail contracts, some zoning code technical cleanups, initiating resolution for tree canopy zoning code, the fiscal year 25 year-end report, and a budget amendment for FY25, FY26 with carry forwards, and potentially a contract, a code amendment on contract authorization thresholds.
So the two budget and finance meetings we have in the fall is September 19th and 3rd? Is that the,
The 19th was supposed to be deleted. Sorry about that. So it's just the 3rd.
that'll be the preview of the year end?
That's right. And then, scanning down just a little bit further. Well, can we go, I think there's one missing work session. Yeah. So, for the 20th, zoning code technical cleanups, Tenor Hill rezoning, and Vision Zero complete streets. Then we have the franchise agreements for the communications companies. And then on the 27th, then, technical cleanups on zoning, the Tenor Hill rezoning actions, to initiate that with the Planning Commission. A resolution on Vision Zero and complete streets, a policy statement there, authorization on the sewer capacity purchase, the tree canopy code amendments, initiating resolution, the 3 communications franchise agreements, the budget amendment, and second reading on the site plan and subdivision, and then final action on the Arlington County Fire Agreement. That's probably takes us far enough. Unless you council wants to keep going.
We said sometime this fall the bike route to the secondary schools was going to be underway with consultants. Is that still the plan, or where is that work?
I think that is still the plan. Let me find out the latest on that.
Anything else on schedule? Okay. So we can cancel Wednesday, 8:30.
Okay.
Thank you all. Anything else? Okay. Good night, all.
National Night Out is tomorrow?
That's right. National Night Out is tomorrow night, 6 o'clock. Might even be earlier than that. Might be like
It
5:30.
starts at 6.
6 to 8 tomorrow. Dunk Tank.
Haha.
That's right. Leaves are starting to fall from the trees.